Hello again in anime realm. Everyone thought this dude was a weak orphan in a whole new world with E-rank skills, but he vowed to get revenge on everyone for sending him to his doom. Tauka was a messed up kid, getting abused in his own house by his mom's new loser boyfriend after his old man passed away. This poor kid would get his ass whooped every damn day, barely getting any food while he cowered in a corner, trying to protect himself. And his messed up mom? She'd just sit there watching TV, ignoring his cries of pain. He grew up being a lonely, weak kid with zero confidence. The dude wakes up from a nightmare of getting his ass handed to him by his stepdad, only to hear the class bully Xiaogo messing with this nice girl named Ayaka. He snatches her book and starts waving it around, clowning her for reading girly novels. Like seriously, this idiot can't grasp that girls can read whatever the hell they want. Tauka imagines how in a TV show he'd step in, stop the bullying, and earn everyone's respect. But he knows in reality, ain't nobody on that bus gonna give a damn. And if he tries to stand up for her, his weak-ass self is just going to get his ass kicked. Most of the popular kids back up Xiaogo, while the others laugh along to avoid being targeted. Even the useless teacher is passed out, and Xiaogo keeps pressuring the girl for her number. Before he knows it, Tauka stands up, looking Xiaogo dead in the eye, and tells him to back the hell off Ayaka. Xiaogo laughs, calling him a simp and weak, but then out of nowhere, Kiri, the most popular dude in class, tells Xiaogo to give the book back. Xiaogo listens and hands the book back to the girl, only to move on to bully another nerd, Yasu. Tauka wonders why Kiri stood up for Ayaka, because that's not his usual style. But before he can dwell on it, some crazy shit happens. Everyone on the bus gets transported to a whole new world. They're all dumbfounded, standing in this completely strange place, while this smoking hot woman stands on a bridge and introduces herself as the goddess, Isis. She explains that whenever a demon king threatens to wreak havoc, the kingdom of Alien summons badass warriors from other worlds to defend their turf. Like 200 years ago, this demon king almost wiped out their whole kingdom. But thanks to some heroes, they whooped his ass and destroyed the entire demon army. Unfortunately, the demon king's back from the dead, which is why they all got teleported to this world as the new heroes tasked with taking his ass down. The students are hella confused, wondering if they're dead or if this is some kinda messed up prank. Their teacher tells them to shut their mouths and listen up to what the goddess gotta say. Tauka checks out the ancient buildings, soldiers rocking armor and spears, and the goddess with the golden eyes. He even pinches himself to make sure he ain't dreaming. Kiri steps up and asks the goddess what's gonna happen if they don't cooperate. The goddess smirks and says she won't be able to send them back to their world. Kiri asks if there's really a way to go back, and Isis says there's a reverse summoning ritual that can send them back. But they gotta kill the demon king and snatch this special thing called the evil element, which only drops when the dude dies. Xiaogo goes off, screaming at her for dragging them into this new world without giving them a choice, and he straight up refuses to help. But then, Isis gets down on one knee, begging them to save her kingdom from getting wrecked. Ayaka speaks up, saying they're just regular humans who can't do jack shit. But Isis promises they got hidden abilities they ain't even aware of. Xiaogo still thinks this whole thing's a joke, so Isis decides to prove it. She summons a prisoner of war, and this freaking massive demon dog. She sets the demon dog free, and it goes straight for the prisoner, tearing him apart. Some of the girls are freaked out, dropping to their knees, while Isis stares down the demon, chants a spell, and straight up incinerates that monster, turning it into ashes. Then she calls the students up, saying they're gonna test their hidden abilities. One by one, they step up to this crystal ball, and it glows different colors to show their skills. After the geeks go through it, Xiaogo walks up to the crystal, and as soon as he puts his hand on it, that thing starts glowing bright freaking red. The goddess is all smiles and says he's got an A-rank skill, making him feel pretty damn good. Then Kiri steps up, but as soon as he touches the ball, that thing starts glowing all bright and golden before straight up exploding. After that, Ayaka steps forward, and turns out she's S-rank. And as more students come up, another girl walks to the crystal, and she's also freaking S-rank. The guards are losing their minds as Isis explains that even one S-rank individual is considered extremely lucky. But having 3 S-ranked is like some next level luck. Then Tauka walks up to the crystal, but when he touches it, the damn thing just glows this weak-ass purple color. The goddess don't even give him a second thought and tells the next person to step up. Tauka tries to ask what rank he got, but she straight up ignores him. So he just walks away, realizing that even in this world, he's gonna be stuck as a background character. After that, Yasu the nerd approaches the crystal, and it turns out he's got some special dark ability inside him that another dark hero had before and became the strongest. Finally, everyone checks their stats as the goddess tells them they got personal abilities that vary from person to person. Before dropping the bomb that they gotta do a critical ritual now, she calls Tauka to the front, and this guard pushes him forward real quick. She sends him down into this dark pit and declares that Tauka's E rank, which is the freaking lowest in the whole class. Apparently, E rankers historically cause a lot of trouble, so they usually get killed. But this time, because they got all these amazing heroes, she's giving the E ranker a chance to save his sorry ass. He's gonna be sent to some abandoned ruins, a dungeon far away where they dump criminals and monsters. She tells him if he can survive down there, they'll leave him alone, and he'll get to keep his life. Otherwise, he can kiss his ass goodbye. Tauka tries to argue, saying he can get better, but the goddess shuts him down, saying he's in the failure frame category, meaning his stats are so damn low that no matter how hard he trains, he ain't gonna get any better. Tauka's straight up pissed off, and he lets the goddess know that he never chose to come to this messed up place. He got summoned against his will, and now they're just tossing him aside. But Kiri cuts him off, saying he's wasting everyone's time because the girls are already exhausted. And damn, everyone agrees with Kiri, leaving Tauka defeated on the ground. Then Yasu walks up to him, and Tauka remembers the time he helped Yasu out after he got bullied. But Yasu shuts him down, saying an E ranker should show more respect to their superiors. Tauka's hope just drains away as the goddess starts the ritual and tosses him a leather bag as his special item, which turns out to be completely useless. Ayaka tries to defend Tauka, saying this shit ain't right, but Aishus is dead set on getting rid of Tauka, so she knocks Ayaka out so she can't complain no more. Tauka's beyond frustrated, and he raises his arm, casting a paralyzed spell at the goddess, but she easily blocks it and straight up calls Tauka a loser for even trying to hit her with his weak-ass E-ranked skills. Then Kiri tries his spell, creating this massive fireball, acting all high and mighty, claiming he was just checking by letting a small amount of mana in the spell. Everyone's laughing at the huge power difference between a loser like Tauka and themselves, while Tauka just hangs his head, tears streaming down his face. He remembers how he used to cry when he was younger, and suddenly his soul tells him to stop acting like some good person and show them the true nature of his heart, the nature he's been trying to suppress for so long. Tauka finally lets it all go, looking up with eyes filled with hate, and he straight up tells the goddess she's a rotten hoe, warning her to be ready for him if he ever makes it out alive. Next thing he knows, he's teleported into this dark cave, and he tries to check his status, but the light's so damn low that he can't see shit. So he pours some mana into the leather bag, and the gem starts glowing, giving him some light like a lantern as he makes his way through the cave. Suddenly, he realizes he's been walking on a bunch of freaking skeletons, scared as hell. He wonders what the hell could have killed all these people when a monster comes at him, and he barely dodges it, taking off running like his life depends on it. The freaking monster is hot on Tauka's tail, and he's hauling ass like there's no tomorrow. He's debating whether to turn around and throw down, but deep down he knows he's screwed because the level difference is off the charts. If he stops, he's straight up dead. Fear grips him, and he starts bawling his eyes out. Then he gets blindsided by a damn rock sticking out of the floor and eats dirt. He glances back and sees death smiling at him, and frustration takes over because his life's been a mess. Right when the monster's about to finish him off, Tauka pulls a desperate move to save his sorry ass. He shoots the paralysis spell, and to his surprise, it freezes the monster in its tracks. He jumps up and bolts, but he hits a dead end in the cave, and another bird demon steps up with murder in its eyes. Tauka ain't having that shit. He raises his arm again and unleashes the paralysis spell, freezing the enemy once more. He realizes it ain't no fluke. His spell actually works, but exhaustion creeps in. He checks his stats and sees his mana is almost gone. But he's got one more trick up his sleeve. He tries casting a poison spell on the monster, and damn, it works like a charm. The demon starts turning black and bleeding all over. Tauka plops his ass down on the cave floor, wondering why his spells are kicking demon ass so hard. Then out of nowhere, he hears something behind him. He turns around and sees the Minotaur demon break free from the paralysis spell, ready to deliver a kill shot. But this time, instead of running like a punk, all the anger he's bottled up from being treated like shit comes rushing back. Even though he's completely drained, he defiantly raises his arms at the demon, swearing he'll kill to survive and live his damn life. He challenges the demon to a fight, not knowing if he'll make it out alive. He thinks he should still have his natural mana, which ain't even shown in his stats. So he wonders what's gonna go down once he consumes that shit as well. Plus, he's sweating bullets thinking about the worst case scenario, and he knows damn well his mana ain't gonna last until he makes it back up to the surface. Then he stops thinking and busts out Paralyze on the monster in front of him, but that shit doesn't work, and he figures out he can't use the same skill on a target over and over. So he puts the monster to sleep with his sleep skill and poisons it to kill it. He figures there gotta be other limits to his skills, like the one he just discovered, and using up his natural mana makes him hella tired. Then he peeps a bunch of monsters coming at him, and he ain't liking his chances of surviving. But he ain't giving up, and he laughs as he gets ready to throw down. He paralyzes as many of them as he can, and he's almost running out of his natural mana too. His consciousness starts fading, but somehow he hangs on, and more monsters keep coming at him. He thinks this might be the end for him, but he keeps using his paralyzed skill because he ain't giving up. No matter how many times he uses it, the number of monsters just keeps growing, and he uses the last paralyzed skill he can manage with his non-existent mana. Just when he's losing all hope, he gets a notification saying he leveled up to level 258, and he uses Paralyze to quickly take down the monsters in front of him. Then he finds out the monster he poisoned earlier straight up died, and that shit gives him a huge burst of experience. He's stoked he can keep fighting and keeps paralyzing all the monsters in his line of sight. His paralyzed skill levels up because he's been using it over and over, and he wonders if he can learn new skills by leveling them up. He sets that thought aside for later because right now surviving is what matters the most, and he finds out he can now target multiple monsters at once. So he then paralyzes all of them and thinks the goddess might be the only one his paralyzed skill doesn't work on. He adds with a cocky smirk, thinking that he's been crushing it in the dungeon with a flawless 100% success rate, and he notices that he can't reach the monsters in the back, which tips him off that his inflict status ailment skill has a limited range. He figures out he can't stack the same skill on a single monster, so he poisons all the paralyzed monsters. This levels up his poison skill too, and he sees them as nothing but experience points now. Then he checks his stats and sees they've all multiplied based on his gained levels. His mana is off the charts because his base mana was already high. He knows his mana is his lifeline here because it's the only way he can use his unique skill. So if he runs out of mana, he's toast. He takes a breather, and the poison monsters start dropping dead one by one. He keeps leveling up till he hits level 395. Then he puts the poisoned monsters to sleep, upgrading his sleep skill to the second level. After all the monsters kick the bucket, his level jumps to 501. He thinks with his current stats, there's a chance he can make it out of this dungeon alive. He tries taking down the monsters in the back, but they bolt before he can get them. Later, he scavenges a robe and anything useful from a carcass nearby. He knows he'll need to find food and water too, so he goes a bit further in search of food and water, but comes up empty-handed. That's when he remembers the monsters he just offed, figuring they were like cows and chickens. He heads back to them and tries to butcher them, but their skin's too damn tough. So he plucks out one of their eyeballs and reluctantly chomps down on the nasty thing, but it tastes like garbage and he can't stomach it. He's running low on strength and starts wondering if this is how he's gonna die. But then he notices the gem on his leather bag has turned partly purple. He channels his magic into the bag to restore the gem to its normal state, but suddenly he feels the bag getting heavier, and he discovers a bottle of cola and a pack of jerky inside. And he chows down, feeling like he's been saved. He ain't sure if the bag will produce more food though, so he spends the next few days trying to find his way out of the labyrinth. A few days later, we spot this dude surrounded by a bunch of monsters that he straight up paralyzed and poisoned. Homeboy's just chilling, waiting for them to kick the bucket. And once they're dead, he levels up like crazy. He looks at the scene he created and damn, it's like a freaking massacre. Shit gets real for him, and he starts bawling, because he realizes the messed up stuff he's capable of. He remembers back in the day when he was a kid, thinking about killing his parents for treating him like trash, but his uncle and aunt swooped in and saved his ass, giving him a normal life and teaching him how to be kind and empathetic. He thought he had become like them, but now he knows he was just acting. He realizes that even after witnessing the bloodbath in front of him, he feels nothing. He's even scared of his own damn self, but he accepts that this is who he truly is. All the monsters drop dead, and he peeps his level shooting up to 957. He says a prayer for the human remains he finds at the scene and keeps moving forward. He paralyzes and poisons another monster he comes across, Noticing that this place is hella different from the other ruins he's been through, he looks around and spots a crystal that looks like the one in his bag. He pours his magic into it, and the door opens to a room. Inside, he finds the remains of a dead couple with no food or water nearby. Looks like they made the decision to go out together. He checks their stuff and scores some gems, thinking he might need them when he reaches the surface. Then he peeps the numerous other rooms in the area, and he stumbles upon one that takes a crazy amount of mana to open. Inside that room, he finds the remains of another body. Noticing a wound that might have been the reason for his death, he finds a letter with him, and after reading it, he learns the man's name is Anglin Bathard, and the people used to call him the Great Sage. But he is better known by the title Anglin, the Hero of Darkness. He remembers the goddess mentioning this dude. Turns out the goddess forced him to come here once she was done with him. So he wanted to entrust the things he brought into this dungeon to someone who had the balls to make it out alive, because he knew he was gonna die here. Tauka then thinks that the goddess said that the Great Demon Empire was evil, but she is even worse, and he ain't all that different from them either. So he thinks this gonna be a three-way battle between the forces of evil. Then he finds a book of forbidden arts among the dark hero stuff. He peeped that the book had recipes for magic tools and medicines, so he knew they're gonna come in handy down the line. He also stumbles upon a scroll of forbidden magic, but he can't read it. Dude is sure it has some powerful magic inside though, because even the legendary sage went all out hiding it away. This might just be his secret weapon against the goddess if he can crack the code. Before he bounces from the room, he notices a page in the book written in blood. It warned Tauka to watch out for the Soul Leader because that's what took out everyone here. Then we see Tauka continuing his journey in the ruins. After a while, he spots a massive gate and figures it might lead to the surface, but he gonna need some crystal to open that door. He realizes that the Soul Leader must be holding that crystal, so he checks his stats before picking a fight with that monster. Right now, his level is sitting at 129. He thinks that should be enough firepower, and he hopes his unique skill gonna do the trick against the Soul Leader. Then he spots a face sporting the crystal he needs right on its forehead, and he realizes that gotta be the Soul Leader. He tries to paralyze the monster, but it shoots a beam and messes up his hand the moment it notices him using a skill. He wraps his hand up, thinking that this beam is triggering whenever someone trying to attack. He finds out this monster ain't got no weak spots, and he wonders what he gonna do. He gotta speak the name of a skill to use it, but this monster ain't giving him a moment to breathe. He can't even target it from no farther than this, because his unique skill has a max range. He wonders if he gotta grind more levels before he can face this thing. He realizes it doesn't even matter if he can't even use his unique skill in the first place. And then the monster starts moving. Tauka thinks the Soul Leader gotta be the reason why nobody ever made it out of here alive. And if he can take this sucker down, he just might find a way out. Meanwhile, outside the ruins, we see this girl running from her chasers. She is standing in front of the disposal ruins, thinking maybe she can lay low here and lose her pursuers. Back at the ruins, the Soul Leader ain't shooting at Tauka, even though it knows where he at. And some nasty gooey stuff be pouring out of its mouth. Next thing you know, that gooey mess transforms into some kind of monster. Tauka realizes the Soul Leader showing him the faces of other humans and the expressions they had before they died. And it looks like the monster amusing himself to see how Tauka reacts to this. So he thinks this thing has some messed up tastes. Then the Soul Leader sneaks up on Tauka by busting through the wall next to him. Tauka then paralyzes the human-like monsters, but he can't bring himself to poison them because they look too damn human, and he thinks that he hasn't fallen so low that he gonna kill humans with his horrible poison skill. The Soul Leader enjoys seeing him all conflicted, so it makes some more human-like monsters. Tauka tells them to back off and keep their distance, and he starts crying thinking he doesn't want to lose his humanity. But the monsters ain't listening. They swarming him from all sides. He notices the Soul Leader being hella thrilled to see him in despair, so it thinks it has found the ultimate prey. Tauka still begging the human-like monsters to stay away, while the Soul Leader enjoying the show. He calls out for someone to come save him, but ain't nobody answering his pleas. Then Tauka notices the Soul Leader's emotions being at their peak, so he paralyzes it. He explained that he had been waiting for it to let its guard down, and he was glad the monster never caught on that he didn't lower his arm through this whole mess. So he was ready to strike whenever. He mentions how the folks who think they are superior always drop their guard around those they see as weak, and that is their biggest weakness. Tauka's paralysis skill is leveling up to 3. and he straight up tells the soul leader that all his hesitation and fear was just an act. He explains how he has been trying to act as harmless and normal for years. Dude even fooled himself so much that he forgot who he truly was. Without a single hesitation, he straight up poisons the human-like monsters. He ain't holding back even if they look kinda human. He actually glad he had the weakest stats up in the ruins, and all the monsters here underestimated him, and that's why he managed to stay alive through it all. He can't even believe that the almighty soul leader got taken down by someone sent here to be disposed of. And watching that soul leader act all high and mighty really ticks him off. Soul leader trying to make a move, but it's futile. Tauka notices that soul leader taking damage trying to move while paralyzed, so he poisons it. And that levels up his poison skill to level 3 as well. Then he uses sleep to knock the human-like monsters out cold. And once that soul leader kicks the bucket, it frees all the souls it gobbled up till now. Everybody's spirits be showing gratitude to Tauka for saving their asses, and the dark hero tells him to seek revenge on the goddess in his name. Then they all vanish into thin air. Tauka thinks he ain't bound by no obligation to fulfill that request. But it's all good because he planning to get his revenge on the goddess regardless of what they say. He snatches that crystal off the soul leader's head, using it to open the gates of the ruins, and finally he makes his way out of there. In the forests outside the royal capital, the rest of Tauka's crew is out there hunting demons to level up. Xiaogo is chasing after a demon dog with a sword, Kiri burning down monsters with his 6 skills, and he hits level 18 like a boss. Over in another spot, that nerd Yasu, who has a messed up personality, was burning monsters with his dark flames and laughing at their cries. But far away from them, there's this shy and innocent girl named Koba who can't bring herself to kill no monsters. But this bully chick Asagi is telling her that if she doesn't kill them, she gonna lose her life because it's the first test from the goddess. Asagi keeps Koba on a tight leash and says the class gonna fall apart soon, with all these selfish peeps formatting factions. Asagi, being a B rank, plans on creating her own crew with the girls who gonna follow her lead. She knows Koba is only a lowly D rank, so she ain't gonna be accepted by Kiri's crew or the other powerful factions. Even Ayaka can't take her in because she is about to die soon. Koba starts freaking out, but Asagi tells her to quit worrying about the small stuff. She just wants Koba to be her cute little pet. And for that, she got her faction to trap a monster so she can finish it off easy. Asagi tells Koba she gotta kill that monster and pass Aishas's test, or else she gonna end up like Tauka. Koba doesn't want to kill any helpless monster, but Asagi keeps pushing her, practically forcing her hand. Eventually, Koba gives in and kills the monster. But that act of violence leaves her feeling crushed. She starts crying, thinking she couldn't help Tauka like she wanted to. Ayaka finally snaps back to reality, and that gut pain reminds her how the goddess straight up knocked her out and sent Tauka away. She wastes no time and goes straight to confront Goddess Aishas, who is fronting with her weak-ass acting skills. She tries to play it off, talking about how she was hurt too sending Tauka into danger. But it's just their kingdom's policy. And then she says that the whole ritual to get rid of the weakest crew member gonna keep going. And while Ayaka was knocked out, she already sent those weaklings who couldn't even take down a single demon away too. Ayaka is fuming with hate for the goddess at this point and tells her that her way of doing things is messed up. Aishas just laughs it off, saying everyone got their own opinions, but she ain't gonna bend over backwards trying to please them. But then Ayaka comes through with a slick suggestion. As an S-rank hero, she gonna hustle hard and cover for those who can't step it up. In return, she wants Aishas to back off on banishing them. Aishas actually agrees to the idea and asks Ayaka to shake hands, like they burying the past and starting fresh with a new perspective. Meanwhile, far away from the drama in the dark forests near the abandoned ruins, there's this woman hauling ass trying to escape from a group of nasty bandits hot on her tail. But damn, she is slipping up and leaving easy clues for the bandits to follow. The bandits planning to let her run wild because they know they're gonna eventually trap her and take her down. At the same time, Tauka just stepped out of the ruins. He checks his stats and sees his mana skyrocketed to over 59,000. But right now, he is more curious about the deets of his skills. He finds out he can use his paralyzed skill on specific body parts, not just the whole damn body. And he can even tone down his poison skill to make it non-lethal. He plotting to test it out as soon as he runs into some demons. But as he keeps moving, he starts hearing squeaks coming from behind the trees. So Tauka peeped a bunch of slimes bullying a smaller slime, and he feels sorry for the little dude. But damn, that little slime got more fight in it than your average bullied kid, and it starts throwing hands back at its bullies. Tauka thinks it's the perfect time to test out his new skills, so he paralyzes all the slimes and then hits the bully slimes with that non-lethal poison. He then dispels the poison and paralysis from the bully slimes, making them run away. Then he turns to the small slime and gives it props for standing up against the bullies. Tauka tells the slime he gonna release it from the paralyzed state and asks it not to attack him. He sets the slime free and keeps on moving, but the slime starts following him instead. Tauka figures the slime's an outcast like him, so he decides to adopt it. He tucks the slime into his hood so it can watch his back and warn him if there's any danger. Meanwhile, Tauka gets his read on with that forbidden art book by the Dark Hero. He finds a recipe for some medicine that can boost even slimes. He then chats it up with a little slime, letting it know he's on a journey for vengeance against those who wronged him. He asks the slime if it still wants to roll with him, and the slime's all about it. Tauka's stoked to hear that and names the slime Pigimaru, and the slime's feeling its new name too. Tauka keeps on walking like a boss when out of nowhere, he gets surrounded by the bandits who are after that mysterious woman. These bandits trying to tire her out. But on the way, they picked up some other presents and ended up here looking for some fun. The bandit leader tells Tauka to hand over all his valuables, and maybe they won't mess him up. Tauka's terrified now because the bandits look scary as hell, and he ain't never fought no humans before. The bandits start arguing about whether they should hurry up and catch that girl or waste time with random nobodies, and Tauka sees his chance to dip out there. He tries to sneak away while they beefing, but the bandit leader ain't having it and tells him to freeze. Tauka throws his hands up and begs for his life, but that just makes the bandit even more eager to take him down. He comes charging at him, but little did they know, Tauka was just acting scared as hell. So Tauka uses his paralyzing skill to freeze the bandit leader in his tracks. Then he takes his sweet time to lay into those bandits, calling them scum because even though they are way weaker than the demons in the ruins, their evil intentions are even more intense than them. Even Pigimaru's mad as hell at those bandits. So Tauka says killing people like them won't mess with his conscience, and he's actually happy because he is getting rid of Earth's garbage. He casts a poison spell on all the bandits, and once they all drop dead, Tauka senses another presence nearby. Turns out it's the mystery girl, and she summons some spiritual armor using her tribe's special technique to protect herself. She can feel Tauka's presence too and knows someone really powerful is close, but the vibe he's giving off is kinda uncertain. Now, the girl ain't taking any chances, so she starts swinging her sword around, cutting through a bush where Pigimaru was hiding. Just then, Tauka sneaks up behind her and freezes her in place. She stutters and asks what he wants, and he says he just wants info because he is new to the area and knows nothing about it. The girl asks about the 4 bandits, so Tauka wonders if they are her crew. She denies it, and he believes her because she ain't oozing that same evil intent like those scumbags. He removes the paralysis just from her head so she can talk freely, but he warns her not to pull any funny business or he'll straight up end her. Tauka steps in front of the girl and keeps it real, saying he doesn't trust nobody, especially not strangers he meets for the first time. Before he can start grilling her, the girl asks what happened to the 4 bandits. Tauka tells her he killed them all, and she can't believe it because apparently the thugs had a reputation for being hella strong. She asks Tauka if he fought them alone or had help, but he shuts her down and ain't giving her no details. The girl's got faith in Tauka, thinking he ain't a bad boy, so she decides to trust him and says she'll keep honest with her answers. Tauka's feeling her cooperative attitude and starts trusting her a little more, but he ain't ready to set her free just yet. They start chatting, and Tauka finds out he ain't chilling in the alien kingdom, but is stuck in some forest down south in the Ulza kingdom. Dude's learning a ton of stuff, and finally, he asks the girl if she can read that forbidden spell scroll. She spills that it's written in some crazy ancient script that barely anyone can decode, but she knows someone who can. She puts Tauka on to this forbidden witch, this chick who got kicked out of her homeland because her knowledge was off the charts, and people thought she was too damn dangerous. The girl tells Tauka that if he wanna meet the witch, he gotta make his way to the Golden Demon Zone, this sketchy-ass area smack in the middle of the continent. Tauka shows his gratitude for all the dope info, and she thanks him right back for saving her from those bandits. Tauka says that the information makes it even, and the girl sends him good vibes, wishing him the best of luck. He thinks she's too damn honest and innocent for her own good, reminding him of his aunt. Anyways, he decides it's time to bounce, and lets the girl know the paralysis spell gonna wear off in a few minutes, so she can go on her way. Pigimaru hitches a ride on Tauka's shoulder, and they talk about how it's unlikely the girl gonna come at them once she's free from the paralysis. But Tauka tells his slime buddy to keep an eye out, just in case because you never know, and Pigimaru's all about helping in any way it can. The scene cuts to the city of Mills, and Tauka's trying to get in, but the gate guards start grilling him with questions. The female guard asks if he's a mercenary here to answer the call to conquer the dungeon. Toka plays along, saying he is, and throws in some praise about how the city's really popping. The female guard isn't feeling how he says the city's name and calls him a country bumpkin for it, but she lets him pass anyway because the Marquis wants as many mercenaries as he can get to conquer the ruins. Toka thinks the security here is too lax since they didn't even check his luggage. He's glad things are going smoothly, and he heads to an inn to book a room. The innkeeper tells him the price, and Toka notices the dudes giving him the stink eye. He figures he can smooth things over with some cash, and tells the innkeeper he had a long journey, so his clothes are dirty. He slips him some money and asks if he can hook him up with something to wear and show him where he can wash his clothes. The innkeeper lights up after seeing the cash and agrees. When asked, Toka introduces himself using the alias Hattie Skull. Later, we see Toka drying his clothes in his room, then heading out to scope out the town. He notices the city seems pretty safe, and the shops around here are typical spots you'd expect in a Western fantasy town, so he wonders if any of them sell magic items. Then he finds the Adventurers Guild, but he wraps up his scouting for the day. Back at the inn, he's eating dinner and digs the taste of the otherworldly food. He notices a loud group laughing and talking. He thinks groups like this make it easy to eavesdrop and gather some much-needed info. So he finds out they're debating which knight regiment is the strongest in the country. They each name a different regiment, but in the end, they all agree the Black Dragon Knights of the Bacchus Empire are the toughest, since they wiped out the Holy Empire of Ni. They mention that just 5 of their knights are as strong as an army, and they've got humanity's strongest hero, Slayer, on their side. After soaking up all the info he could, Toka heads back to his room with some food for the slime. The slime devours it like it's the best meal ever. Toka starts planning his next moves, realizing that his #1 priority is finding someone who can read the scroll of forbidden magic. He figures this means he's got to track down the forbidden witch hiding in the Golden Demon Zone or the land of the golden-eyed monsters. He also needs to brew up the monster enhancement solution for Pigimaru. He remembers those dudes from earlier talking about the labyrinth and how they found a new floor there recently. Toka checks out the recipe for the enhancement solution and sees he needs powdered bone from a skeleton king to make it. Turns out the skeleton king chills in the mill's ruins, so he decides to join the ruins expedition. The next day, there's a huge crowd gathered around the ruins. The Marquis steps up to greet everyone and introduces himself as Lord Cred Hercley. He announces they've just discovered a new floor in these ruins and wants everyone to explore it. He says if anyone finds the Dragonite Chalice, they'll score 300 gold coins. He also mentions he'll pay good money for any other treasures they bring back and says they can keep any monster materials they find. Toka's pumped to hear he can keep the bone powder for himself. Then the Marquis tells everyone to line up and register. While lining up, Toka spots some annoying dude causing a scene about the cloaked girl he saw earlier. The guy's raving about how beautiful and graceful she is, wondering if she's someone famous. The girl asks him to leave her alone, but the guy won't quit, saying her voice is amazing too and guessing she might be the knight captain of some nation. Hearing this, the other mercenaries start wondering if she's Sarah Ashrain from the Holy Empire of Ni. Toka overhears them and finds out Sarah is an elven knight captain. The annoying dude claims he's met Sarah before and she's super hot, but she treated him like dirt when he asked her out. The girl says she doesn't remember meeting anyone like him, which pisses the guy off. He glares at her and insists she's definitely Sarah. He says if she's not, she should show her ears to prove she's not an elf. He yanks off her hood, acting all cocky like he just won the lottery for revealing the identity of the Princess Knight. But then he notices she doesn't have pointy ears. Toka confirms this is the same girl he met in the forest, and the girl introduces herself as Mist Belucas. The annoying dude is stunned and accuses her of making a fool out of him. He gets all riled up, saying he'll get his revenge, then storms off. The scene cuts to Toka doing some shopping after registering, and he bumps into Mist again. She asks if he's here for the Marquis's call too, and he says he is. He mentions that she had a rough time back at the ruins, but Mist brushes it off like it's nothing. Toka tells her to watch out because the guy she messed with was red with anger and might try something. Mist explains she's used to dealing with people like that, and it's easier once they hate her and stay away. Toka can tell she's avoiding interactions on purpose and says he has a favor to ask. He wants her advice while shopping so he doesn't get ripped off and offers to pay her for it. Mist isn't thrilled about it, but agrees since she needs the money. They introduce themselves, and Toka senses that she knows he is lying, so he tells her Hattie Skull is just an alias. He says they both have secrets, so no need to share real names, and Mist agrees. They buy some supplies, and afterward Toka pays Mist 3 silver coins. She's surprised to get that much, but Tauka insists it's a fair price. She accepts the money and tries to leave, but she collapses before she can. Tauka asks if she's okay. Noticing the dark circles under her eyes, he realizes she hasn't slept for days, but she insists she's fine and hurries off. Tauka then thinks it's time to head to the ruins. The scene cuts to him on the first floor of the ruins. He sees some mercenaries running away, screaming, and finds out they're fleeing from a miniature version of the Minotaur he faced at the last ruins. He paralyzes and poisons the monster. Noticing he can easily stab through its skin with a dagger, he realizes the monster from the ruins of Disposal had exceptionally tough skin. The mercenaries from earlier come back with someone with them, but they're shocked to see that the monster is already dead. They can't believe it only has a single dagger wound and wonder how anyone could have taken it down so easily with just a weapon like that. Tauka hears all this while keeping hidden and shakes his head at their cluelessness. After a bit, he takes a break, noticing that the monsters here aren't giving him any experience points and aren't much of a threat. He's moving at a relaxed pace when he overhears the annoying guy from before chatting with two other mercenaries. He finds out that the jerk is trying to recruit them to go after Mist. The guy's all worked up, saying he's not going to let her off easy since she made him look like an idiot. He reveals he's a total psycho by talking about how he's going to twist her smug face with despair and then feed her to the dungeon's monsters. The mercenaries are hoping they'll get a shot at her before that, and the jerk says they can do whatever they want with her amazing body. Tauka is disgusted by their plans, so he steps up to confront them. They're surprised to see him and wonder if he overheard everything. Once they realize he did, they think they'll have to take him out too. They figure they can blame his death on the monsters, as people die in the ruins all the time. But before they can attack, Tauka raises his hand, asking them to stop. They're amused by his plea for mercy, but they don't stop, so Tauka paralyzes them. They're stunned when they can't move, and Tauka tells them they're the ones about to meet their end. He reflects that even he's repulsed by this dark side of him. Realizing it might remind him of his parents, he poisons the mercenaries, finding satisfaction in leaving them to their grim fate. The annoying guy vows to make Tauka pay for this, but Tauka just laughs darkly, saying he won't get the chance. Some monsters then show up, and Tauka leaves them to feast on the damn mercenaries. Tauka keeps on exploring and finally clears the floor right above the new one. He decides to chill for a bit before diving deeper. After catching a 3-hour nap, he gives a shout out to Pigimaru for keeping watch. He then heads to the next floor and notices a mercenary group called the Saber Tigers heading back. He stops them and asks why they're bouncing. They say some weird stuff is going down in these ruins. There are monster bodies all over the place with no visible injuries, and even though their crew was the first to get here, the monsters are still dropping like flies. They're spooked and decide their buddies' lives are more important than any treasure. So they're heading out. They ask if Tauka wants to roll with them, but he says that he will continue exploring. They ask him to pass the word to any other mercenaries he runs into, and he's cool with that. As they leave, Tauka realizes they were talking about the monsters he took out. He figures news will spread, and fewer mercenaries will stick around. He moves on to the next floor and finds the Dragonite Chalice, but there's a stone monster chilling next to it, and Tauka knows it's gonna come alive the second he grabs the chalice. So he paralyzes and poisons the monster before it can even make a move, then snatches the chalice. The monster keels over, and Tauka starts thinking about what's next. He's on high alert when he senses someone sneaking up behind him, but relaxes when he sees it's just Mist. She's surprised he got to the chalice first and figures she must have fallen behind during her break. Tauka offers her the chalice if she wants it and hands it over. Mist's not sure about taking something so valuable without giving him anything back, but Tauka insists he's not looking for a handout. Mist's honor won't let her take it without offering something in return, but Tauka opens a hidden door to the next floor and reveals his real goal isn't the chalice. It's a monster lurking deeper in the ruins. Mist is blown away that he knows the way to the lower floors and offers to guard him on his way down as thanks for the chalice. Realizing she's not backing down, Tauka agrees. He tells her not to pry into his business, and he'll do the same for her. Tauka also lets Mist know that he might be down here for a while, and he won't be responsible if she wants to bail early. She's cool with that, and they head deeper into the ruins. Cut to Mist in action, taking down a monster with ease. Tauka's impressed and gives her props for her 6-sword skills. He then asks her about the monsters with golden eyes and those without. Mist explains that monsters with golden eyes give a lot of experience points and are prime targets for heroes from another world to level up. She adds that heroes from other worlds don't gain experience from killing humans, which is why Tauka didn't get any XP for offing those mercenaries in the woods. She goes on to say that monsters without golden eyes are just regular monsters and can even have relationships with humans. According to the legend, the Demon King radiates this special energy called Demon King's essence, and the monsters affected by it get golden eyes. The golden eyes amp up the monster's violent instincts, and Tauka starts to think that the golden Monokiri let out might be a clue. They move on to the next floor, and Mist mentions she's been sensing a monster nearby for a while, but ignored it since it's not strong. Tauka realizes she must be sensing Pigemaru and introduces him to her. He hopes they'll get along, and Mist finds the slime cute. Tauka decides they should take a break, and Mist says she'll let him sleep while she keeps watch. Tauka tells her to rest up too because it won't be good if she collapses halfway through. She agrees and lies down, but Tauka uses his skill to put her to sleep. He figures she'll get some solid rest now, and this makes her concealment spell wear off. Seeing her elven traits, Tauka realizes she's actually Sarah Ashrain. Meanwhile, some guys find the belongings of the White Walker mercenaries. With the bodies already eaten by monsters, they're puzzled about who could have taken down such a skilled group without leaving any signs of a fight. Civet Gartland, humanity's strongest knight, thinks it might have been Sarah Ashrain and hopes she'll be able to give him some real entertainment this time around. The next day, Mist wakes up and her transformation skill automatically kicks in, making her look like a regular human. She freaks out thinking Tauka might have seen her true form, but chills out when she spots him snoozing on the floor, drooling like a baby. Pigemaru rolls up and starts squeaking, which makes Tauka stop faking being asleep and get up. They kick off their journey into the dungeon, and when the whole floor starts rumbling and shaking, they decide to hightail it out of there. Then out of nowhere, a massive monster busts through the wall next to them, and Mist clocks it as the Skeleton King. Tauka figures it's the boss monster of this dungeon since it's way stronger than any demon they've faced so far. But Mist knows its weak spot is the weird bone under its chin. Break that, and it's game over. Mist thinks regular mercenaries don't stand a chance against the Skeleton King, but together they might have a shot. The Skeleton King sees Mist as a bigger threat than Tauka, and Tauka's cool with that. Mist starts activating her power, telling Tauka she needs to use it to beat the boss monster, but has to keep it a secret. She asks him to keep it on the down low as a special armor appears on her. Then the Skeleton King charges up an energy blast, and Mist tells Tauka that if she can't handle it, he should dip. But Tauka with a smirk steps up first, paralyzing the boss monster with his skill. Mist is thrown off by this, but when Tauka casts a poison spell on the demon, she realizes he's the same guy she met in the forest. The Skeleton King kicks the bucket from the poison, and Tauka grabs the bones needed to make the strengthening potion. He notices Mist has a ton of questions, so he promises to answer them once they're topside. As they start heading back, Pigemaru alerts Tauka about something inside the Skeleton King's body. Tauka digs around and finds a small bundle in the demon's chest cavity. It starts glowing and a strange symbol shows up on it. Inside the bundle, Tauka finds a strange egg, and since Pigemaru seems really into it, he decides to keep it. Far off from them, Tauka's classmates are hitting up their first dungeon. Some students bolt when skeleton knights start chasing them, while a girl's on the floor bawling over her chopped off arm. Her friend tries to help, but the monsters are on them quick. Somehow, everyone manages to escape, and Ayaka stands her ground, ready to take on the monsters. But before she can do anything, Xiaogo and Kiri swoop in, smashing the monsters in one hit. Kiri, though, doesn't care about his classmates and Ayaka has to step in to protect them. Kiri's all cocky, bragging he's now level 24. Back in Dungeon City, Tauka and Mist make it to the surface. Mist shows the guards the Dragon Eye Cup, and with everyone's attention on the ultimate dungeon treasure, Tauka slips away quietly. Mist catches up with him, saying she'll get her reward from the Lord tomorrow at a public ceremony. Tauka asks if she's free till then. When she says yes, he asks her to come to his room that night so they can talk. She gets it and grabs his hand as he's leaving, thanking him again for the cup. That night, Tauka's working on the strengthening agent when Mist shows up at his door. Tauka tells her he wants to hire her as his bodyguard for the rest of his journey. He points out that with the reward money from the cup she's set, but he still wants her help. He's trying to make her feel a bit indebted, even though he's not too fond of this move. Tauka then pulls out a map, saying he wants to reach the Golden Demon Zone in the center of the continent to meet the Forbidden Witch. He says the place is crawling with powerful monsters, and he needs someone skilled to watch his back, and Mist is the only one he trusts. Mist looks unsure about heading to such a dangerous spot, and Tauka tells her to take her time thinking it over. Then out of nowhere, he calls her by her real name Sarah. She answers on reflex, then realizes she's been played. Tauka says sorry but tells her he used his skill to put her to sleep in the dungeon. So he knows her secret. He says he needs her as a valuable asset, so he won't snitch on her. He knew her biggest worry about rolling with him was keeping her secret. But now it's all out in the open. Mist drops her guard too and explains she can hide her true form with the help of spirits. But those spirits require that she doesn't sleep in exchange for their power. And if she sleeps, she will go back to her original self. She then shows her real form to Tauka, saying she trusts him now. In return, he tells her his real name to even things out. She agrees to be his bodyguard, and Tauka gives her one of the blue crystals he found in the first dungeon as payment. Mist freaks out seeing it because the crystal is actually a rare item called Blue Dragonstone, which isn't even on the market anymore. Just this piece is worth more than the reward she got for turning in the cup to the Lord. She refuses to take something so valuable and hands it back to Tauka, who thinks she's too kind for her own good. He takes the stone from her and then tosses it back, saying it's hers now, and she can just throw it away if she doesn't want it. She reluctantly accepts it, then tries to tell Tauka about her past and the people still hunting her. But he cuts her off, saying he doesn't care about her past. As her employer, the only thing he cares about is her skills. The next day, while they're having breakfast, folks at the inn start talking shit about Mist leaving Tauka's room late at night. Tauka tells Mist to ignore it, then asks her what she knows about forbidden spells. She says the goddess Isis banned some ancient spells and called them forbidden. Tauka thinks if the goddess banned them, they must be dangerous for her. He thanks Mist for the info, and she blushes because it's the first time he's openly thanked her. After that, Mist heads out to get her rewards, and Tauka goes to the forest to boost Pigimaru with the strengthening medicine. Then we see Mist finds herself at a party full of nobles and rich folks, feeling out of place. It's getting late, and she still hasn't gotten her reward. Then the Lord announces a famous magician who can break illusions for his guests. Mist gets worried she might get exposed, and Tauka starts suspecting something's up since she's running late. Meanwhile, Ayaka visits Goddess Isis to ask about treating the girl who lost her hand. Isis says she healed the girl only because she's a B-rank hero. She then asks Ayaka why she isn't joining Kiri's group and tries to make her feel guilty for not teaming up with another S-rank hero. Despite the manipulation, Ayaka stands her ground, saying she can't work with Kiri right now. She swears to fulfill her duties as an S-rank hero on her own. Hearing this, Isis says she'll let all the students who couldn't pass the first trial join Ayaka, so she can train them. Ayaka panics, reminding the goddess they had a deal that those students would be left alone if she fought on their behalf. But Isis says she got an order from the king and has no choice. She tells Ayaka if she doesn't take the losers with her, they'll be disposed of. So Ayaka has no choice but to accept Isis's order now. On Tauka's side, he figures Mist either took the prize money and bailed or something went down. The first option seems whack, so he heads out to find her. On the way, he hears folks talking about the girl who got the cup being the wanted elf princess. They say she dipped into the forest after her secret got exposed, but it won't save her because the Black Dragon Knights are on her trail. Just then, 3 dragons appear in the sky heading towards the forest. In the forest, as Mist is trying to escape, one of the Dragon Knights attacks her. She uses her spirit magic to bring it down with an aerial slash, then enchants her sword, and takes down the 2nd and 3rd Dragon Knights too. She's worn out from fighting, even though they were low-ranking knights. Suddenly, a spear comes at her, and she blocks it. Then a dragon charges at her, but she realizes it's a decoy, and the real enemy is in front of her. She rushes ahead and clashes swords with a high-ranking knight named Gizun, who tells her she's gonna die here. Mist can't use her spirit armor at full strength because of the illusion-breaking spell earlier. Gizun keeps pushing her back, revealing he's got orders to kill her on sight instead of capturing her alive. But after he takes a good look at her, he decides to have some fun first. Gizun keeps pushing Mist back, and when she loses balance and falls, he kicks her sword away and pounces on her. Just in time, Tauka shows up and paralyzes Gizun and his dragon. Mist gets out of the situation and asks Tauka what he's doing there. Tauka puts non-lethal poison on Gizun, puts him to sleep, and reminds Mist they can't talk about private stuff with others around. He tells her he came to pick her up, but she says she can't accept his job offer now because he'll be hunted by the Dragon Knights if he's with her. She tries to give the blue dragon stone back to him, but he gets irritated and throws a pouch full of dragon stones at her. Mist is confused, and Tauka tells her he can't find a better escort than her and doesn't want to bother trying. Then out of nowhere, he asks her to undress, and Mist wonders if she heard that right. But he explains that the people of Mills saw her in this outfit, and apologizes for giving her the wrong impression. Sarah feels embarrassed for thinking he was planning something lewd, and she reminds him that they still haven't confirmed if their agreement stands. Tauka then offers a proposal. She can seek shelter with the Witch of Taboo. He elaborates that no one has ever discovered the witch's hideout, and since he's heading to the land of the golden-eyed monsters anyway, their deal should still be valid since their destinations align. Sarah is curious and asks why he's willing to go to such lengths for her. So Tauka reveals that she reminds him of someone from his past. He admits that while they don't share the same looks or personality, they have a similar vibe. He confesses that abandoning her now would feel like abandoning his aunt, and this makes Sarah realize that Tauka is genuinely a kind person. As they talk, the poison dragon dies, but Tauka notices it wasn't enough to level him up. He then releases the paralysis on Gizun's mouth, warning him that he'll show mercy if Gizun answers his questions honestly. Gizun, however, only taunts him, mentioning that the Black Dragon Knights won't let Tauka get away with this. Tauka is unfazed and makes it clear that he has no intention of letting Gizun get away either, but he plans to end Gizun's suffering by disabling the non-lethal setting of the poison. Sarah then demands to know who wants her dead, and Gizun seems amused at the thought of her reaction when she finds out. But before he can spill anything, a lance flies from the sky, killing him instantly. Tauka looks up and spots some of the Black Dragon Knights hovering in the sky. One of them stands out with white hair and red eyes, Civet Gartland, known as the strongest knight of humanity. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Emperor of the Holy Empire of Ni, who wakes up in a cold sweat, haunted by a dream where Civet demanded that Sarah be handed over to him. Back in the forest, the Black Dragon Knights touch down, and Sarah notices that Civet is accompanied by 5 of the knights, but she realizes one of them is missing. Civet casually tells Orphan that he made sure to silence Gizun, but Orphan comments that killing him was unnecessary. Civet, however, advises him not to get too caught up in the small stuff, suggesting that their orders likely came straight from Holy Emperor Ortola himself. Elsewhere, we see Ortola, still shaken by his nightmare. He reflects on how everything about Sarah's body reignited a fire in his withered old self, and while he didn't mind letting her escape initially, the thought of another man laying a hand on her is unbearable. He declares that he's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure she's erased from existence before him. Back in the forest, Sarah is stunned to learn that the emperor she once served wants her dead. Civet explains to Orphan that Gizun would have been a problem, so he killed him, but adds that if Gizun had somehow dodged the attack, he would have let him live. Tauka, knowing how deadly the strike was, realizes that Gizun wouldn't have had a chance even if he wasn't paralyzed. Schweitz then asks how they should deal with Sarah, revealing that their king left the decision up to them. He suggests it might be fun to pass her around among their subordinates as a reward before killing her. But Orphan disagrees, pointing out that Ortola specifically asked for her corpse to be returned with her purity intact. Sarah is struggling to process what she's hearing, refuses to believe that her emperor would want her dead. But Orphan coldly informs her that Ortola can't die peacefully as long as she's alive. Shattered by the revelation, Sarah is further stunned when Civet tells her he'll give her a chance to live if she can defeat him in a duel. Mitama, sensing a good show, remarks that Sarah's spirit regalia is famous, and Civet seems eager to test it out in battle. However, just as the duel is about to begin, Civet's attention shifts, and he becomes more interested in Tauka, sensing something unusual about him. So Civet turns his attention to Tauka, asking about him, and Tauka immediately knows he can't afford to slip up in front of this guy. He notices that Civet and his crew are out of his reach, and realizes that Civet is even more dangerous than he initially thought. But instead of panicking, Tauka grins. Tight situations like this always get his blood pumping. Playing it cool, he casually asks if he can have a word with Civet. But first, Civet wants to know his name. Tauka throws out the name Hattie Skull, but Civet isn't fooled for a second. He knows there's got to be some reason behind the alias. Schweitz then wonders aloud why Civet is even bothering with this guy. And Civet explains that it's odd this dude isn't even a bit scared, despite standing in front of the infamous Black Dragon Knights. Instead, he's just waiting for the right moment to strike. Schweitz is taken aback by this revelation, and Civet continues, saying that anyone who's aware that one wrong move could end them, but still wants to talk, has to be someone worth paying attention to. Tauka realizes that Civet's no fool and knows he needs to tread carefully. So, he asks Civet if he's looking for a worthy opponent, and when Civet confirms it, Tauka points out that it's strange, considering there are plenty of superhuman opponents out there. He even mentions the goddess of Alien, to which Civet agrees, adding that Bacchus and the kingdom of Alien have strong ties. Civet admits he's holding out hope for the heroes summoned by the goddess, as their blessings allow them to reach their full potential quickly. He's convinced that these heroes will one day be worthy foes, and he's just biding his time for that moment. Tauka realizes that Sivit's sole desire is to find an opponent who can match him. Sivit then turns to Sarah, casually telling her that she's no longer of interest to him. He coldly mentions that he'll deliver her severed head to Catalia, the princess of Ni, leaving Sarah horrified. But Sivit isn't done. He tells her not to act so high and mighty, reminding her that she's the reason Bacchus suddenly switched sides and invaded Ni in the first place. Sarah is stunned by what she hears, and Orban drops the bomb that Bacchus obliterated Ni because the goddess demanded Sarah be handed over. But the Holy Emperor refused. While this conversation unfolds, Tauka's wheels are turning as he hatches a plan to save his skin. He turns to Sivit and asks if he's really searching for a foe who can genuinely put his life on the line. Sivit confirms that he is, and Tauka boldly claims that he'll become that very foe. Sivit raises an eyebrow at this, intrigued, and then Tauka drops the real bomb. He's a hero summoned by the goddess, revealing his true name. Everyone, including Sarah, is shocked to hear this, and it definitely grabs Sivit's attention. He wonders what a hero like Tauka is doing in a place like this. Tauka knows he can't outright lie, not to someone as sharp as Sivit, so he spins a story close to the truth. He explains that he holds a unique position among the heroes, which is why he's acting independently. Sivit's curiosity deepens, so he asks why Tauka is going solo. Tauka replies that he's in a league of his own, and because of this, he's been granted the freedom to do as he pleases. Sivit is taken aback, impressed that even the goddess acknowledges Tauka's potential, and he wonders what Tauka wants from him. Tauka then makes his move, asking Sivit to spare him for now, promising that one day he'll grow strong enough to kill him. Tauka doesn't stop there. He vows to even trample the goddess herself if that's what it takes. Sivit, intrigued by Tauka's boldness, asks how he plans to get stronger. Tauka explains that he's heading to the land of the golden-eyed monsters, walking a path different from the other heroes, a path the goddess has allowed him to take. He assures Sivit that he plans to return one day, not to disappear but to settle the score. Sivit, intrigued by Tauka's determination, agrees to let him go, looking forward to their future battle to the death, and he tells Tauka to leave. Sivit then mentions they'll also leave once they deal with Sarah, but Tauka steps in again, saying that wouldn't work for him. He explains that he needs Sarah to safely navigate the land of the golden-eyed monsters. Sivit is surprised by Tauka's audacity, that he would take Sarah with him without the goddess's blessing. Tauka tells Sivit that it doesn't matter to him whether the goddess approves or not. He's going to use Sarah to become stronger himself. Sivit likes the sound of that twisted ambition and decides to spare both of them, which shocks the other dragoons. Sivit casually mentions that they can always kill her later, and when Orban tries to argue, pointing out that Tauka might disappear, Sivit shuts him down with a chilling command to stay quiet if he wants to keep breathing. Orban is terrified now and immediately backs down. Sivit then orders Schweitz to inform the last of the 5 dragon knights about the change in plans, and they all prepare to leave the forest. But just as they turn their backs, Tauka makes his move. With a swift motion, he paralyzes them all, causing the dragoons and knights to collapse onto the ground. Tauka, now standing over them, calmly explains that he has no intention of dragging this out. This is a tale of revenge, and he knows the dragon knights will only be a thorn in his side later. That's why he's eliminating them now. Sivit is struggling to move and demands to know what Tauka has done, so Tauka reveals that he's poisoned them all with a lethal dose. Despite the paralysis, Sivit continues to try and fight back, which impresses Tauka, because even the powerful Soul Eater couldn't move this much under the effects of the paralysis. Sivit, fueled by sheer willpower, tries to attack, but his body fails him. Tauka watches in astonishment, realizing that he needs to see this guy die with his own eyes, just to be sure. As Tauka prepares for anything, he starts linking his mind with Pigemaru, but then after Mitama's death, his remaining life energy transforms into a signal flare, alerting the others to their location. The other dragon knights roll up, and Tauka casually tells Sarah he's sticking around with Pigemaru, adding that she can bolt if she feels like it. But Sarah, being the loyal bodyguard she is, chooses to stay by his side. The dragon knights are floored when they see the 5 dragoons in such a wrecked state, and they're even more shocked to find Sivit. Their supposed untouchable leader is actually injured. Sivit then quickly orders them to keep their distance and attack from far away, and never get close. Tauka then completes his link-up with Pigemaru and starts laying out the issues with this power-up. It takes time to activate, and it drains his mana like crazy. So this power, amped up by the monster-enhancing solution, is only good for short bursts of combat, but that's all he needs. Pigemaru's slimy arms shoot out, extending Tauka's range, and he paralyzes and poisons the dragon knights in the sky one by one. Then he makes the remaining 3 black dragon knights fall asleep, leveling up his sleep skill to level 3 and unlocking the ability to induce berserk, darkness, and freeze effects. Tauka tests out these new powers. Berserk makes his enemies go wild with violent urges, and he figures it's a perfect combo with Paralyze to finish them off faster. Darkness blinds them completely, making them stumble around helplessly. He doesn't feel a shred of guilt as he tortures them after all. These guys were planning to do some sick stuff to Sarah. 2 dragoons die during his experiments, and when all the poison dragons finally kick the bucket, Tauka gains even more levels. But to his surprise, Civet is still hanging on, demanding to know who the hell he really is. Tauka simply replies, "Just an Avenger," before Civet succumbs to his injuries and dies. Later, Tauka tells Sarah that she should be able to cover her tracks now, and she thanks him for the help. She notices the gentle expression on his face and asks about it. Tauka admits he's thinking about someone gentle, which is why his demeanor has softened. Sarah then brings up the last of the 5 dragoons, the one known as the Hero Slayer. Tauka recalls noticing that the dragons ridden by the 5 dragoons were different in size from the rest. Sarah confirms this, but Tauka reassures her that there's nothing to worry about. He already crushed that guy when he ran into him before they met up. Sarah is shocked that he took down the Hero Slayer so easily. Meanwhile, we cut to Ayaka checking her stats. She's frustrated that she still hasn't awakened her unique skill, and the other heroes are with her, waiting for the goddess. Instead, Nyantan Kikipat, a follower of the goddess, shows up and informs them that she'll be training them since the goddess is busy. Shogo, not thrilled about taking orders from someone smaller than him, challenges her to a fight. But in the blink of an eye, she completely humiliates him, leaving no doubt about her capabilities. She tells the group they'll head back to the capital soon and enter the next stage of their training. Back in the forest, Tauka has filled Sarah in on everything that's happened since he arrived in this world. He's dead set on using his power to crush anything standing in the way of his revenge. Sarah, now knowing the truth about her nation's destruction, reveals that she has her own grudge against the goddess, so she offers her strength to Tauka for his quest of revenge. But Tauka warns her that his quest is selfish and without much value. But she insists on helping him as a way to repay him for saving her. Reluctantly, he agrees to rely on her, promising that one day he'll return the favor. The scene shifts to Kikipat meeting the goddess. Ishus, the goddess, thinks she was right to have Kikipat watch over the heroes. Kikipat is strong, wise, and fiercely loyal, so much so that she proves her loyalty by licking the goddess's feet. And the goddess ponders that the day the heroes clash with the great demon empire might be closer than she thought. The scene then shifts to some soldiers inspecting the ruins of Disposal, casually checking if everything is in order. The crystal they use to scan the area shows no reaction, which should be a red flag. But instead of investigating further, they shrug it off, assuming the crystal must be malfunctioning. They decide to report that everything is just fine, sticking to their routine because, in their minds, there's no way anyone could survive the ruins of Disposal, a place with a survival rate of 0%. Meanwhile, Tauka is browsing through a mask vendor's shop in a nearby village, intrigued by a particular mask. The vendor notices his interest and assumes Tauka is a fan of Lord of the Flies. Tauka, confused, asks who that is. The vendor enthusiastically explains that Lord of the Flies was a legendary figure who turned a monster-infested island into a fortress, defending it against all sorts of invasions. He became the master of demons and was eventually shunned by the very source of evil. Though his army was wiped out, they went down in such a badass way that they're still remembered and admired. Cut to Sarah, who's staying at an inn in the same village. She's deep in thought about Tauka, deciding not to confess her feelings. She figures that worrying about her emotions would only distract him from his journey, so she resolves to focus on being his sword and support for now. Later, Tauka enters a tent and tries on the mask. As he gazes at his reflection, he admits to himself that he doesn't feel like much of a hero at the moment. In fact, he feels more like a devil. Then he swears that one day he'll crush the goddess Ishus, warning her not to underestimate the determination of a man who sold his soul for revenge. The scene shifts to the castle of the Magnar Kingdom, where the kings of the allied nations are gathered for a tense meeting. They're shocked to hear that the 5 dragoons have been defeated, and King Ganoza can hardly believe it, struggling to accept that such powerful forces are no more. King Jin, with a somber expression, confirms that he personally identified the corpses of the 5 dragoons, adding that they're still investigating the circumstances. Ganoza then turns to Alien, asking if they have any information to share. King Yusuf prompts the goddess Ishus to speak, and she reveals that the Black Dragon Knights were tracking Sarah Ashrain before they were killed. So Queen Alma asks if there's any clue where Sarah went afterward. Jin reports that they found bloody, torn remnants of Sarah's clothes at the scene, and based on the amount of blood, They believe she was seriously wounded. Alma muses on the possibility that Sarah and the dragoons might have taken each other out, then mentions that she heard King Ortola passed away last night, losing his mind before his death. Ganoza dismisses this, saying he doesn't care about a cowardly king who sold out his own country without a fight. Aishus then brings up the grave loss of the Black Dragon Knights, who were their best defense against the Great Demon Empire. She acknowledges that losing them is a major blow to the Holy Alliance, emphasizing that the heroes from another world will now be even more crucial. Foken, with a skeptical tone, points out how conveniently Alien seems to flourish every time evil rears its head. The goddess, not one to let an insinuation slide, questions Foken's implication. He elaborates, noting that whenever the Great Demon Empire returns, all the nations are forced to rely on Alien. Aishus reminds them that they have no choice, as the essence of the Demon King suppresses the full power of every living soul in this world. Foken, seemingly probing, asks if she knows anything about the legends of the Godslayer. Aishus dismisses the relevance of such a story, brushing it aside as unnecessary at the moment. Foken, seeing he won't get anywhere, apologizes for the interruption. Ganoza then shifts the focus back, asking if they believe Sarah Ashrain was responsible for the downfall of the 5 dragoons, and he adds that the cursed magic users of Ashant are taking credit for the act, claiming it was their doing. The scene shifts to Tauka and Sarah entering a bustling town, and Sarah informs him that the land of the golden-eyed monsters lies further north of here. As they walk, Tauka notices that no one seems to be pursuing them, and Sarah explains that this city will be their best option to make any necessary preparations. Tauka's attention is then drawn to a massive coliseum, and Sarah explains that it's called the Bloodsport Coliseum, an arena where slaves and merchants battle each other to the death. The fighters, known as Bloodsport warriors, can earn rewards by winning matches. Tauka realizes this is eerily similar to the gladiators of ancient Rome. Sarah adds that the Mercenary Guild and the Duke run the place together. It's now become the prime source of entertainment for the masses, but began as a way to assess fighters for the Mercenary Guild. The two of them head to an inn, where Sarah suggests booking just one room to save on travel funds. Tauka points out that he's a man, but Sarah doesn't seem to care, even sounding pleased at the idea of sharing a room. They settle for a single room, and the scene cuts to them having a meal in a nearby tavern. While eating, Tauka overhears a group discussing the downfall of the Black Dragon Knights. One person mentions a rumor that Sarah Ashrain was responsible for killing the 5 dragoons. Another argues that Sarah was actually killed by them, and claims that Ashant was the one who took down the dragoons. This grabs Tauka's attention, and he listens as the person explains that Ashant is boasting about cursing the dragoons to death. Tauka curiously asks Sarah what she thinks of these claims, and she admits she's heard of Ashant. They're known to worship the god of curses. As they talk, a group of Ashant's guardians swagger into the tavern, acting as if they own the place. Tauka sizes them up and thinks they don't seem like much of a threat, feeling a strange satisfaction that they're taking credit for the demise of the Black Dragon Knights. Some folks in the tavern are convinced that the Ashant guardians might have actually taken down the Black Dragon Knights, while others are skeptical, wondering who could possibly defeat the 5 dragoons. They speculate that maybe the Dragon Slayer, the Leopard Woman, or the Witch of Taboos could pull it off. They also mention that no one's seen the witch in over a decade. But one of the patrons recalls that someone in this very city has actually met the witch. Tauka, hearing this, wastes no time and approaches them, asking for more details. Though they're initially cautious, they agree to spill the beans once Tauka offers to buy them drinks. The patrons then reveal that the strongest Bloodsport champion in town is the one who supposedly met the Witch of Taboos. Tauka wonders how he can meet this person, and just then, luck seems to be on his side as the champion walks into the tavern. The guys point out that this is Eve Speed, the fiercest Bloodsport warrior around. Tauka immediately seizes the moment, offering to treat Eve to something. He introduces himself as Hattie, expressing that he's been eager to meet her. Eve, however, isn't one for small talk and tells him to cut to the chase, knowing full well he's not interested in her just because she's a Bloodsport warrior. So Tauka directly asks if she knows where the Witch of Taboos is. Eve admits that she's ventured into the land of the golden-eyed monsters but denies ever meeting the witch, claiming she doesn't know the witch's whereabouts. Sarah senses something off about Eve's response, and Eve then asks Tauka why he's searching for the witch. He casually explains that he's curious and aspires to be a scholar, hoping to hire a mercenary to pay the witch a visit. Eve warns him against it, saying the land of the golden-eyed monsters is treacherous, and doubts he'd survive more than 3 days there. Tauka thanks her for the concern, and Eve leaves with a final piece of advice to cherish his life. Later, Sarah tells Tauka that Eve was lying, and he realizes that Eve must indeed know where the witch is. In their room, Tauka suddenly remembers he forgot to bring food for Pigemaru. Realizing he'll need to use his magic bag, he pulls out some bread and feeds it to Pigemaru. Both he and Sarah also take a bite, and Sarah is pleasantly surprised by the taste. So she curiously asks if this is a common food in his world, and Tauka confirms it is. He notices how much she enjoys it and wishes he could give her more, but laments that the bag produces items randomly. Sarah admires the wrapper of the bread, finding it beautiful, and Tauka thinks it might seem more special because it's from another world. They then turn their focus to discussing their next move, and Tauka hopes to get Eve to reveal the witch's location. So Sarah suggests they gather more information about Eve tomorrow. Tauka muses on what a bloodsport warrior might value most after their life, and Sarah speculates that it's probably money, as it could buy their freedom, though it would require a significant amount. Meanwhile, we see Eve meeting with a dark elven girl, comforting her and promising to get her out, and the girl trusts Eve completely. Back at the inn, Sarah practices her swordsmanship, donning her spirit regalia. Tauka watches, thinking her spirit regalia looks like something out of a magical girl transformation scene, and he's captivated by the elegance of her swordplay. After she finishes, Tauka is curious to learn and asks if there's a trick to close-range combat. So Sarah wonders if he is interested. Tauka explains that he's been relying too much on his current skills and might need something more in the future. Sarah is surprised but agrees to give him some pointers, which reminds her of her old days training nights as their captain. She then instructs Tauka to try attacking her, and he throws a punch, but she effortlessly restrains him, explaining that this technique can be used on enemies he doesn't want to seriously harm. Embarrassed by their close proximity, especially with her sweating, she lets him go and apologizes for getting her sweat on him. Tauka reassures her that he doesn't mind, so she asks if he's okay with her teaching him this way. He assures her it's fine, and they continue their practice. The scene then shifts to Sarah, caught in the act of sniffing Tauka's clothes while she's washing them. Realizing what she's doing, she feels a wave of embarrassment wash over her, relieved that no one saw her indulging in such a shameless act, especially considering her feelings for him. Just as she's trying to compose herself, Tauka appears out of nowhere. Panic sets in as she wonders if he sees her just now, so she tries to play it cool and asks him what he wants. Tauka, oblivious to her inner turmoil, mentions that his clothes were missing, and she explains that she took them to wash along with her own. He's surprised she's okay with doing that, but she reassures him that she's used to washing clothes. Later that night, while Sarah is peacefully sleeping, Tauka finds himself wide awake, diving into some books. He can't help but notice how serene and gentle Sarah looks in her sleep. He reflects on how she's been bottling up all sorts of emotions just to be his sword, and he feels a surge of gratitude for her dedication. She suddenly wakes up surprised to find him still awake, so Tauka says that he couldn't fall asleep, and Sarah immediately reaches for her herb pouch. She shows him a selection of herbs and explains that each one has different effects. Some help with sleep, while others can invigorate and energize, leaving a person feeling, well, a bit too excited. Then her face flushed with embarrassment after realizing how that might sound, so she clarified that she didn't mean anything by it. Tauka knows this and takes out some cubes to make soup, intending to mix in the herbs. As they prepare the soup, Sarah samples it before adding the herbs, noting how delicious it is even without them, and adds that this is an excellent portable meal in itself. But then, in her flustered state, she accidentally pours the wrong amount of herbs into her soup. Tauka, noticing this, offers to drink it instead, but she insists on taking it herself. They both sip the soup, and Sarah finds it oddly refreshing. Tauka, however, is puzzled since the herb should have made them sleepy. That's when Sarah realizes, with growing horror, that she used the herb meant to make someone energized, and also she drank a lot. Tauka sees the silver lining as he can stay up and read even more now. As he's reading, Sarah, feeling the effects of the herb, asks if there's anything she can do for him. He gets too hot just by looking at her, but he manages to tell her to get some sleep since they need to gather intel the next day. She then asks if he's resistant to temptation, and he admits that for now, he is. His thirst for revenge is so overpowering that it overshadows everything else. He explains that once his revenge is complete, he might be able to focus on other things, but until then, he's stuck with this curse. Moved by his determination, Sarah vows to do everything in her power to help free him from this curse, and he tells her he's counting on her. The scene cuts to them at the Colosseum the next day, and after some digging, Sarah fills Tauka in on Eve's backstory. Eve was originally a slave, sold to the Colosseum by her slaver, and she became a sensation from the start because leopard men are a rare sight after all, and in her 3-year record, she hasn't lost a single match. Tomorrow is her final fight, and she's already earned enough to buy her freedom. Tauka realizes that this makes it tricky to use money as leverage. But Sarah adds that Eve actually earned enough to buy her freedom 2 years ago, but she kept fighting to save someone else. Tauka learns that it's a child Eve is trying to free, and Sarah also reveals that most of the previous Bloodsport champions have met their end during their final match. Tauka's heard whispers about this too and figures it's because they get thrown against an impossibly tough opponent. But Sarah shares a darker rumor that the Duke who runs the Colosseum rigs these fights to put the champions at a disadvantage. Tauka amusingly thinks that this could be the gap they need, and meanwhile we see Eve gearing up for her fight. Sarah asks Tauka whether there are any chances for Eve to survive, but Tauka with a grim expression insists that the Duke would never let her live, and will definitely try to kill her off with the introduction of a new fighter, one who will soon become everyone's favorite. Sarah is shocked at this and asks what they will do tomorrow, so Tauka without hesitation responds that they don't have to wait until tomorrow, they are going to make their move today itself. Later that evening, Tauka ends up tracking Eve down into a dark alleyway and steps in front of her, blocking her path. Eve looks confused and asks what he wants, and she adds that she already told him that she had never seen the witch. Tauka doesn't buy it for a second and immediately tells her he knows that's a lie, but Sarah confirms it isn't. Sarah then walks in, saying they know she is hiding something, and Tauka cuts in, bluntly telling her to cut the crap and come clean. Eve instantly takes a defensive stance, her hand reaching for her sword, but Tauka quickly tells her to chill out, assuring her they only want to help. Eve, still suspicious, keeps her hand on the sword while Tauka continues, explaining that the Duke is planning to have her killed in the match tomorrow. And he emphasizes that this would be a huge problem for them, as they need to find the location of the witch. Tauka then directly asks Eve if they should kidnap the girl she's hiding and get her out of this slave city tonight. Eve gets furious at this suggestion and threatens to cut their hands off if they dare lay a finger on the girl. But Tauka tells her to rest easy and reassures her that they mean no harm, they're just here to help. Sarah then chimes in stating they know she has been fighting these past 2 years solely for the sake of the little girl Lisbeth. Eve then realizes these two really do know everything about her, so she takes a breath, calming down slightly. Admitting that she can't just turn away from the fight tomorrow, she feels she has no choice but to participate. Tauka asks whether they should take Lisbeth away to safety, but Eve firmly replies that if they don't follow the city's rules and try to run, bounties will be placed on their heads, and they'd be hunted by soldiers and assassins for the rest of their lives. She confesses that she might have considered running if she were alone, but with Lisbeth by her side, she can't take that chance. Tauka insists again, suggesting he could take her to the safety of the Golden Zone where the witch lives, a place no one dares to enter. But Eve shakes her head, saying even he wouldn't make it through the zone itself, it's way too dangerous. Tauka, however, makes a promise. No matter what happens, he will make sure Lisbeth stays safe. Eve weighs this option and looks at Sarah, instantly sensing her experience in martial arts. Then turns to Tauka and asks what he's capable of. Tauka, with a casual shrug, tries to downplay his skills, claiming he could defeat the Skeleton King without much trouble. Eve smirks and acknowledges that while a Skeleton King is a tough opponent, it's nothing compared to what he'd find in the Golden Zone. Tauka replies with a grin, revealing that he's the one who took down the Black Dragon Knights. Eve laughs and dismisses him and says that a weakling like him couldn't handle even the weakest Dragon Knight. But Tauka doesn't flinch, he raises his arm, and before Eve can even unsheath her sword, he activates his paralyze ability, freezing her body completely, and while she struggles to break free, he calmly tells her to relax, warning that the more she fights it, the more HP she'll lose. Then he adds almost with a smirk that with this ridiculous ability, he managed to defeat the hero of humanity all by himself. Sarah then steps forward and removes her cloak as well, revealing that she is the elf princess the Dragon Knights were chasing, and claims she saw the battle with her own eyes. With that revelation, Tauka breaks Eve free from the paralysis spell, proving his powers to her. But Eve insists that despite everything, she will not rely on their help. She plans to win her final match tomorrow fair and square and free Lisbeth from slavery on her own terms, trusting her own strength more than that of strangers. Tauka looks at her and asks if she really thinks the Duke would let her go that easily, mentioning that the Duke has a reputation as a massive pain in the ass. Eve argues that, despite the Duke's shady character, he is still human and can't be cruel enough to break his own word, and she is confident in her abilities to defeat her opponent and start a new life. Tauka decides to leave and tells her that if she changes her mind, they will be waiting by the city's front gates until dawn. They head back into the city, only to come across a large crowd gathered around a group of dark mages. The mages claim that the man of the house insulted their god, so they took it upon themselves to slit his throat. Tauka and Sarah choose to ignore them and continue on their way. As night begins to fall, they hear the same dark mages harassing a poor girl for no reason. When she refuses their attempt to recruit her into their cult, one of them slaps her hard across the face. Sarah's anger flares and she moves to draw her sword, but Tauka stops her, and instead he casts his berserk spell on one of the mages. The man immediately goes wild, hitting and biting everyone around him, which creates an opportunity for the girl to escape. Tauka then casts the berserk spell on the rest of the mages, who start fighting each other, allowing him and Sarah to slip away unnoticed. A little after midnight, both Tauka and Sarah set out again towards the front gate, while Sarah asks if he really believes Eve would seek their help. Tauka replies that he knows for sure the Duke is a total bastard, and if Eve decides to go the legal route, she will get royally boned. Meanwhile, Eve has been wrestling with the same thought all night, unable to sleep, wondering if the Duke would keep his word. She decides to get some answers and directly asks the Duke if their deal about freeing Lisbeth is still on. But before she can enter the room, she overhears a soldier talking to the Duke about tomorrow's battle. The soldier asks if there are any changes in the plan, but the Duke coldly replies that there will be no changes and that Eve will die tomorrow. This truly shocks her as she hears the Duke mention he plans to give her a poison that would numb her senses. The soldier laughs, and the Duke goes on to complain that he had to spend a lot of money on the shrine being built for her since she was so well loved by the audience. But he sneers, calling her a subhuman creature who shouldn't even be alive, and Eve can't believe her ears. The soldier then asks what will happen to the little girl, and Duke Dipshit replies he'll raise her as the perfect wife. And if that doesn't work out, he will just pimp her out for a lot of money. They all start laughing while Eve clenches her teeth, then returns to her cell, finally coming to a decision. As she's leaving, a man named Mauji calls her, saying he's eager for their fight tomorrow. She says it's good, and as she turns to leave, Mauji's assistant rushes in and tells him there's a problem. Eve then grabs her cloak and heads toward the main gate, where she finds Tauka and Sarah waiting. Tauka is surprised to see her so soon, but she replies that the Duke is indeed a filthy animal who can't be trusted, so she'll take Tauka's offer and run away. Tauka states he wants something in return, and Eve agrees, saying she will reveal the location of the witch and even enter the Golden Demon Zone with them. That settles the deal, and Tauka gets ready to kidnap the little girl. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the Dark Elf is working in a tavern, cleaning up tables, while the fat owner storms out of the kitchen, screaming at her to move her hands faster. The poor girl tries her best to pick up the pace, but the fatty with less than a brain cell starts hitting Lisbeth for absolutely no reason until the little girl falls to the floor, laughing at her misery. Lisbeth struggles to hold back her tears, trying to stay strong as she remembers how brave Eve is and takes comfort in that thought. But the fatty with no reason at all starts screaming in her ears again when suddenly the door slams open, sending the fat, ugly piggy sprawling to the ground. Eve storms in, furious at the fatty for treating Lisbeth like that, and draws her sword. The fatty instantly drops to her knees, begging for her life, claiming she never wanted to hurt the girl, but the Duke ordered her to discipline Lisbeth harshly, and if she didn't, he would have punished her instead. Eve tells her that she's taking Lisbeth and gives her a choice: tell everyone Lisbeth was kidnapped and that Eve went after the kidnapper, or face the consequences. The fatty sobs and agrees, desperately telling Lisbeth that she never meant to treat her badly but was forced to. Then suddenly Tauka enters the tavern wearing his mask and tells Eve to go on ahead as he just needs to check on something. Once they leave, he walks up to the ugly fat woman and coldly tells her that she might have fooled Eve with her performance, but he can see right through her pathetic act. He tells her that he knows what it's like to suffer abuse, so he won't let her off that easy. The woman tries to bluff, insisting she's the only one who can protect them from the Duke's wrath when he finds out about this. But Tauka's had enough of her crap and immediately uses Paralyze, followed by a poison spell, which somehow makes her even uglier as she starts dying slowly. Tauka calmly takes out a knife and sets up the scene to look like a robbery before leaving the tavern and escaping through the sewer. They start making their way through the underground passages, with Lisbeth nervously introducing herself and begging Tauka to let her join them, because she wants to stay close to Eve. Tauka hesitates, pointing out that their path will be dangerous, but Eve cuts in, assuring that Lisbeth will be fine as long as they stick together. Seeing her determination, Tauka agrees. Eve then asks Tauka about the strange noise she keeps hearing from his backpack. With a slight grin, he pulls out Pigimaru, revealing his unusual companion, before they continue through the sewers. Soon, they find themselves navigating through dense forests when Eve approaches Tauka, declaring her complete trust in him and stating she is willing to risk her life by his side. Tauka is taken aback and asks what sparked this sudden faith. So Eve explains that Tauka could have taken more sinister routes to extract information from her or used Lisbeth as leverage, but he had chosen honesty instead. She then questions why he wants to meet the witch, and Tauka reveals he possesses an ancient text he believes only the witch can decipher. Eve then asks if he plans to harm the witch, but Tauka reassures her that as long as the witch doesn't pose a threat, he has no reason to hurt her. Not long after they ride on horseback, and Tauka confides to Sarah that he suspects Eve has some connection with the witch. He mentions that he's also heard the witch is a dark elf like Lisbeth, which might work in their favor if they need someone to vouch for them. Suddenly, he spots a flurry of lights coming from the kingdom and quickly realizes that an alarm has been raised. Eve suspects that Mauji has somehow tracked her and offers to hold off their pursuers while the others escape. But Tauka refuses, insisting they fight together. He quickly devises a plan, diverting half the enemy forces by leading them on a chase after decoy horses, while the group hides in the bushes, preparing for a surprise attack. He instructs Eve to retreat with Lisbeth, as Sarah is needed at the front for his plan. And with everything set in motion, Tauka takes up his mask, preparing for their final stand against the Duke's forces. Meanwhile, we see the members of Ascent noticing a broken tree branch. Mauji suspects the branch was deliberately broken to trap them. He quickly realizes his enemies want to lure him into the forest, so he calls out for them to show themselves, declaring that he has seen through their ploy. Sarah then emerges, wearing the mask of the Fly Swordsman, a figure who appears in the legends of the Lord of the Flies. Mauji demands she hand over Eve and Lisbeth, promising to spare her life if she complies. He even offers to welcome her into the ranks of Ascent, noting she seems like a capable warrior. Sarah then asks what would happen if she refuses, and Mauji coldly states he will make her suffer using his curses. He adds that even the 5 dragoons could not withstand his curses, nor could humanity's strongest warrior. Sarah, playing along, asks him to promise the safety of Eve and Lisbeth before she leads him to them, so Mauji agrees, giving his word. With this, Sarah tells everyone to follow her, and they start to move, but Mauji suddenly stops them. He realizes she has no intention of simply handing over the girls, pointing out that her wording gave her away. She said, "everyone," when it would have been enough for just a few men to accompany her. He concludes she is trying to lure them deeper into the forest and wonders if she needs them in range for something. So he quickly orders his group to maintain their distance and prepare for an attack. Sarah, unfazed, reminds them they were ready to kill her with their curses. Mauji responds by revealing a secret. The members of Ascent are actually successors of the Assassin's Guild. He explains that a hero from another world once declared the guild evil and exterminated it, but they have taken up their work again as users of curse magic. But Sarah realizes they are actually using poisons, not curses, and Mauji elaborates that their poisons are highly advanced. He explains they can only be synthesized using special techniques passed down among the few survivors of the Assassin's Guild. Sarah understands now what they call curses are actually these advanced poisons, which leave no trace. Mauji continues, mentioning how the tragedy of the 5 dragoons played right into their hands. Their mysterious demise could only be explained by curses beyond human understanding. That's why they proclaimed themselves the slayers of the 5 dragoons. With no one able to prove their curses were fake, people chose to believe them. And he adds that in a world without proof, the loudest voice wins. Then when Sarah asks him about his ultimate goal, he explains they plan to use Duke Zuin to carve out a central role for themselves in the nation. So she realizes they intend to assassinate anyone who gets in their way. Mauji then reveals that his ultimate aim is to take over the entire country for himself, and he demands to know where her other allies are. Sarah calmly replies that she is the only one accompanying Eve and Lisbeth, but Mauji seems skeptical. So to make him believe her, Sarah takes off her mask and reveals her identity, stating that she is the one who survived facing the 5 dragoons. Mauji then realizes she is Sarah Ashrain and wonders if she is truly the one who killed the 5 dragoons. Sarah replies that she might have, but Mauji scoffs, refusing to believe she could have defeated humanity's strongest warriors. He then introduces the man who was supposed to fight Eve in her final Bloodsport match, naming him as Belger. He also introduces Belger's brother Varigan, and declares them the strongest siblings in Ascent. Mauji adds that they had a younger brother who was part of the White Walkers group that had been chasing her, and now Belger and Varigan are eager to take revenge on her for their brother's death. Mauji then asks Sarah what she plans to do next, and reveals that his subordinates have already surrounded her. He explains that the ones she sees now are just a decoy, while others from their group have circled around, masking their presence. He then tells her not to worry, saying he won't kill her because she has a pretty face and he'll take his time enjoying her instead. And then he commands her to bend the knee right where she stands. Sarah listens, and Mauji smugly adds that one day he might grant her the honor of bearing his child. Sarah thinks to herself that it's time for Tauka to act. At that moment, Tauka uses a blinding flash to disorient everyone. We see that he has merged with Pigimaru and uses his tentacles to paralyze all the members of Ascent. He thinks they must not have expected him to have a long-range attack like this, and Mauji, confused, wonders where their other forces are. Tauka tells him that he has already taken out all 15 of them while Mauji was busy talking, and then he poisons them all. He reveals that Mauji was clever enough to notice Eve's intentions and that he would suspect the broken branch was a setup. Tauka predicted that Mauji would avoid entering the forest, fearing a trap, and that's why he instructed Sarah to pretend to lure them in. He deliberately tipped Mauji off, making him feel in control. This is what caused Mauji's overconfidence and paralyzed his ability to analyze the situation. As the poison takes effect, Mauji and the others fall. Sarah remarks that everything went exactly as Tauka planned, and he thanks her for playing along with their little charade. He notes that Mauji's mistake was not considering the possibility of a more elaborate plan, and then he tells Sarah to go back and update Eve on the situation. As Sarah leaves to do so, Tauka notices that the first wave is returning. He thinks to himself that this is unfolding exactly as he anticipated and instructs Pigimaru to connect with him again. But he realizes Pigimaru is too drained to do so. Eve sees this and thinks that not even Tauka can predict everything, so she offers to help him, and Tauka asks Sarah to take care of Lisbeth while they prepare to fight the first wave. Tauka and Eve head towards the approaching enemies, and he asks her if she can count their numbers. So Eve counts them all and goes to confront them. The soldiers attempt to attack Eve when they spot her, but Tauka quickly paralyzes them all and poisons them as well. Just then, the Duke and some of his soldiers arrive from behind, and he declares that there is no escape for them. His subordinate then sneers, saying they will kill Eve and make Lisbeth wear a dress made from her skin. Tauka hears this and thinks to himself that these men are absolute scum, so he tries to paralyze them. But his powers don't work. He realizes he has reached the maximum number of active targets. Thinking fast, he uses his dark skill on the man and blinds him, so Eve takes the opportunity and swiftly decapitates him. Tauka then casts dark on the soldiers accompanying the Duke, and Eve cuts them down as well. The rest of the soldiers are terrified and start to flee, but Tauka tells Eve not to let anyone escape, so she hurls a spear at the retreating soldiers. Tauka then realizes that his paralysis skill can only affect 80 targets at once, so he begins using dark on any soldier he can find. Then one of the soldiers tries to strike at him from behind, but Sarah shoots him down. The Duke, panicking, kills his own soldiers who try to retreat and orders the remaining men to kill the creepy man in black, frantically insisting that as the Duke, things will go his way. Watching this, Tauka thinks he doesn't even need to use his berserk skill to drive the Duke mad. Eve then thanks Tauka, admitting that although she is a warrior, she had begun to feel tired of the endless fighting. But fighting alongside him like this is a delight. She then goes on to finish off the remaining soldiers one by one. The Duke is terrified and tries to flee, vowing that they will meet a cruel end in the future. But Tauka paralyzes him, turning to Eve and asking her to finish the job. Eve tells the Duke she might have forgiven him if he had only sought to harm her, but going after Lisbeth was unforgivable. So without hesitation, she beheads the Duke, and the scene reveals the mess they have made in the forest. When the battle is over, Sarah and Lisbeth come out of hiding, and Tauka asks Sarah to take Lisbeth away. He thanks her for the help with the bow, and she apologizes for acting without permission, but he assures her it's fine since she is the vice leader of their mercenary group. Later, we see Tauka using a freeze spell on the bodies of the Ascent members. He explains that this spell encases living people in ice, but when used on corpses, it treats them as objects that can be crushed into powder after being frozen. He tells Eve that he plans to use this skill to eliminate the bodies of the Ascent. He adds that these men claim to have slain the 5 dragoons, and he intends to make that accusation stick to them forever. With that, he crushes their bodies into dust. Meanwhile, King Jin learns that the Ascent have disappeared, and a messenger informs him that all they found at the scene were the corpses of the Duke and his soldiers. Jin is troubled by this news, as it disrupts his plans to use the Ascent as pawns, so he wonders how he will explain this to the goddess. He then orders his soldiers to do everything possible to find the Ascent. Meanwhile, we see rain falling in the forest, so Sarah and Lisbeth take shelter in a cave, where Sarah is drying her wet clothes. Seeing Sarah's hot look, Lisbeth wonders if she will ever grow to look like her. She recalls how the owner of the tavern where she worked told her she wouldn't be considered a proper woman unless her black melon grew. Sarah tells her not to worry about anything the tavern owner said and advises her to only let the words of those she trusts take root in her heart. Lisbeth nods, saying she will trust Sarah's words in this case, and thinks it feels like having another big sister. Soon, Eve and Tauka join them, and Lisbeth and Eve quickly fall asleep. Sarah suggests that Tauka rest as well while she keeps watch, but he says he isn't feeling sleepy. She offers him her lap to rest on, but he knows she is tired too and offers her his lap instead. Sarah quickly takes him up on the offer, but when she notices his awkward reaction, she realizes he was just kidding. She apologizes, but Tauka assures her it's fine. Then his curiosity takes in and asks if he can touch her ears, admitting he's been fascinated by them for a long time. She allows it, but when he senses she feels uncomfortable, he quickly lets go. Sarah then asks if he has any special feelings for Eve or Lisbeth, since he treats them the same as he does her. Tauka explains that Eve reminds him of his uncle. Though Eve has a different gender and attitude, she shares the same heart. And he adds that his aunt and uncle are the only reason he wants to return to his world. As for Lisbeth, she reminds him of himself. He explains that he too was abused as a child. But the key difference is their response to hostility. He is ready to eliminate anything that threatens him and admits he's not a good person like her. And he tells Sarah she is free to leave whenever she wants if she doesn't want to be part of his revenge. But Sarah assures him that she has no intention of leaving, as she has her own feelings about the goddess of Alien. Hearing this, Tauka promises to repay her for accompanying him on this journey. So he offers to grant any request she has if it's within his power. He tells her to think about it, then suggests she rest. She agrees, and as she lies down, he uses his sleep skill on her. Elsewhere, we see Ayaka secretly training with Nyanten. Ayaka thanks her for the training, and Nyanten remarks that Ayaka might surpass her in technique one day. She also asks Ayaka to keep their training a secret, explaining it would be difficult to get permission from Goddess Isis if anyone found out. Ayaka agrees, and then asks why Nyanten chose to teach her. Nyanten confesses it's because Ayaka reminds her of her little sister. Then as she leaves, she warns Ayaka not to show any weakness in this world, or she will fall. We then see Lisbeth wearing a new dress, and she is delighted with it. She thanks Tauka for the gift, and Sarah suggests they come up with a name for their mercenary group. She explains that they might need to identify themselves when they cross into the land of monsters, and proposes the name Lord of the Flies Warband. She reveals that this was what the army of the Lord of the Flies was called, and everyone likes the idea, so Tauka agrees. They continue their journey, and by evening they reach the land of the golden-eyed monsters. Tauka notices a corrupted tree in the center of the area and learns that it was once a sacred tree. Eve then asks him to pour some magic into her hand, revealing a crest. She explains that this crest is passed down to the leaders of their tribe and their children. The green dot represents their current location, and the red dot marks the location of the Witch of Taboos. Realizing they need to head toward the red mark, they decide to camp for the night since it's already late. That night, as Tauka looks out over the land of monsters, he reflects that his hatred for the goddess hasn't diminished, even after all this time. He vows to show the goddess what hell is like and decides to use the land of monsters as an exp farm to level up. He knows he may never reach the level of the S-class or A-class heroes, but he is determined to close the gap between them. Meanwhile, the goddess is informing the heroes that they have leveled up significantly. However, she warns them that raising their levels only improves their base stats. They still lack the necessary technique. That is why she has summoned some renowned individuals to train them, aiming to bring out their full potential. She also confirms that the Great Demon Empire is on the move and that their next battle will be something beyond their wildest expectations, so she encourages the heroes to do their best in that battle. Later, she tells Nyanten they must keep the heroes leveling up in plans to send them to the land of monsters once they have mastered some new techniques. Back in the forest, we see Lisbeth carrying a large bag of luggage, so Sarah offers to take it off her hands, but Lisbeth insists that she's fine. She explains that her chances of survival will be better if the others have to carry less, and she asks Sarah to let her handle it. Eve agrees with Lisbeth and urges Sarah to respect her wishes. Tauka also supports this, reminding them that Lisbeth is part of their mercenary band. He adds that he hopes she will speak up if she gets tired and asks Pigimaru to keep an eye on their surroundings. As they move forward, the group feels relieved that they currently have enough food and water. However, they soon sense a lurking monster. Eve steps up to face the creature while the rest of the group hides. Observing the monster, Tauka notices that it resembles the ones he encountered in the ruins of Disposal, except for its seaweed-like head. Eve engages the creature in battle, and while hiding, Tauka casts a paralysis spell on it. Once immobilized, he steps out of hiding and poisons the monster. He commends Eve for her efforts, and she asks if he accomplished what he aimed to do. He nods and explains that he has, and then he puts the monster to sleep. He adds that he wasn't sure if his skills would work on the creatures in the land of monsters, but now he is certain they do. A short while later, the monster dies. Tauka muses that although these creatures look similar to those in the ruins of Disposal, they are actually weaker. He feels a pang of disappointment, realizing that the land of monsters is not as formidable as he had imagined. He thinks to himself that if this is the best the land has to offer, its monsters will be no match for him. He begins searching the monster for useful materials, which piques Sarah's curiosity. So she asks him what he's doing, and he explains that he read about this type of monster in the Book of Forbidden Arts, and she intriguedly finds the description in the book when he hands it over to her. She then notes that the creature is an ingredient for creating a forbidden item, similar to the voice-altering stone in the Lord of Flies mask. Noticing Sarah's interest in the book, Tauka offers it to her, saying she can keep it if she likes. She thanks him warmly, and Tauka realizes he needs to be cautious with his words around Sarah because she has a knack for seeing right through him. After collecting the materials, Tauka declares that it's time to begin their conquest of the land of monsters. The group moves forward, and soon they find themselves crossing a river. Tauka manages to cross without any problems, and then it's Lisbeth's turn. Eve offers to help her, but Lisbeth insists on doing it herself. She carefully hops across the stones but slips on one of them, but thankfully Pigemaru is there to catch her just in time. Eve is relieved and thanks Tauka for having a safety plan in place. But Tauka smiles and says that he wants to do everything he can to support Lisbeth when she sets her mind to something. He adds that he was once in a similar situation, but he clarifies that he's only helping her because it benefits him in the end. Lisbeth finally makes it across the river and notices the group was whispering. She asks if they were talking about her. Eve quickly denies it and makes up an excuse, saying they were discussing children born between high elves and humans, which are rare, so she then wonders aloud what the children of Tauka and Sarah would look like. Sarah, who is in the middle of crossing the river, overhears this and becomes distracted, losing her balance and falling into the water. Moments later, we see her drenched, apologizing for letting her guard down. Eve is amused and surprised that even Sarah can get distracted sometimes, and that makes Tauka unsure whether Eve is clueless or cunning. Noticing that Sarah is shivering from the cold, he drapes his overcoat around her shoulders. He lightly jokes, hoping she doesn't mind that it smells like him. Sarah smiles and admits she likes it, surprising Tauka, who had meant it as a joke. But it turns out Sarah was joking too. As they continue their journey, Eve suddenly senses something approaching, so Sarah quickly moves to protect Lisbeth. Tauka then asks Eve if these are monsters she recognizes, and she admits she can't defeat them. He wonders if this is what forced Eve and Lisbeth to flee the land of monsters in the first place, and she confirms it is, so Tauka tells her to fall back, understanding that this is a threat she can't handle. Eve then retreats, and Tauka decides he doesn't have time to merge with Pigemaru, so he takes cover behind a tree. The monsters come into view, and Tauka's excitement builds at the prospect of facing opponents strong enough to overwhelm even the greatest bloodsport warrior. And as soon as the creatures enter his range, he swiftly casts a paralysis spell on them. Not wasting any time, he follows up with a berserk spell to finish the fight quickly. After the monster dies, Tauka gains a level, and Eve can't help but notice that Tauka seems familiar with these creatures. So Tauka explains that they are probably Nazorts, and he begins to cut a part of their paws. Eve asks with a grimace if he plans to eat them, but Sarah quickly clarifies that, according to the Book of Forbidden Arts, what Tauka is taking is an ingredient for enhancing slimes like Pigemaru. Realizing this, Eve understands that Pigemaru will be the one consuming it, so Pigemaru looks disgusted, but Tauka reassures him, saying it probably won't taste bad once he turns it into a solution. Suddenly, they all feel a brief but intense murderous intent, which quickly vanishes, leaving them bewildered. They look around, unable to find the source of the feeling. As they prepare for a potential fight, Pigemaru alerts Tauka that the murderous intent is coming from his bag. Tauka checks and discovers that the egg he picked up earlier is glowing. It cracks open, and a horse emerges, rapidly growing into a full-sized creature right before their eyes. The group is stunned, and Tauka wonders aloud what kind of monster this could be. But even Sarah is at a loss. The horse creature then rubs affectionately against Tauka, who cautiously pets it. And as he does, he notices something unusual on its back. So Sarah explains that it's an organ for absorbing magic, a unique feature found in magical creatures and certain monsters. Sensing an opportunity, Tauka asks everyone to step back. then begins pouring his magic into the organ. He theorizes that the horse may have grown by absorbing ambient magic, so he tries to replicate the effect. Using his stats window, Tauka monitors his mana consumption, and after spending 1,000 magic points, the horse grows even larger. The group watches in amazement as the creature transforms before their eyes. Tauka thinks this size is perfect for hauling their luggage, but the horse seems to want more, nudging Tauka to continue. Tauka obliges, pouring in another 10,000 mana points. The horse transforms once more, becoming a massive, muscular creature with 8 powerful legs. Tauka is impressed, thinking they've added an intriguing new companion to their group. Lisbeth asks him what he plans to name the creature. Noting its 8 legs, like Odin's legendary horse, Tauka decides to call him Slay, short for Sleipnir. The beast seems to like its new name, and when Sarah reaches out to pet it, the creature responds by enthusiastically licking her. Eve laughs, noting that it seems to have taken quite a liking to her. Tauka then asks the beast if it can return to its original form, and he's relieved to know it can shift back and forth with ease. Meanwhile, we cut to Ayaka's squad, where the heroes are reflecting on their weaknesses. Despite their concerns, Ayaka reassures them that they are doing their best. Then over with Asagi's squad, the mood is more upbeat, and her teammates compliment her leadership, noting how well they've been leveling up. Asagi then attributes their success to the group's natural talent and teamwork, explaining that they coordinate effectively to find monsters and fairly split the experience points among themselves, like good friends. She adds that because of this, even the shy Kabato has been able to level up, and Kabato gratefully thanks her for the support. Then we see that Kiri looking tense, so Xiaogo asks what's bothering him, and Kiri expresses his frustration, saying he doesn't like how their trainers are merely sending weaklings their way to help them gain experience. So he feels they're being grossly underestimated, and decides it's time to prove a point. The scene shifts to the instructors of the heroes, who spot some dangerous monsters heading their way. They decide to handle the threat themselves, believing the heroes might not be able to manage these foes. They call Nyantan for backup, but Kiri is visibly annoyed that they're being told to stand down. As a few Nazorts approach, Nyantan sizes them up and realizes they're too strong for her to save the kills for the heroes, so she quickly dispatches one, and the other instructors take down the second. But then a whole horde of Nazorts charges toward them. Refusing to remain idle any longer, Kiri leaps into action, unleashing his Draconic Buster to eliminate the monsters. After the battle, he demands that the instructors improve their opinion of him, declaring that this is what he's truly capable of. Meanwhile, Kabato notices that the Takao sisters are nowhere to be seen. We then see the Takao sisters some distance away, hearing the loud noises from the direction of the other heroes. Realizing something is happening, they decide to head back. Itsuki remarks that there's no point in sticking around, as the spies they found earlier had killed themselves upon discovery. Hijiri agrees, suspecting the spies were sent after them, probably on orders from the goddess Isis. Later, we see Tauka staring off into the distance while camping in the forest. Sarah approaches him, noting that thanks to Slay, they're making better time than expected. So she mentions they'll soon be able to find the Witch of Taboos and asks what has caught his attention. Tauka explains that he noticed a strange light in the distance and thought it might be some monsters fighting each other. Sarah realizes he's looking to the northeast, the direction where Alien lies, home to the troublesome goddess they all despise. The scene shifts to the next morning, and Sarah wakes up to find Tauka missing from their camp. Eve reassures her not to worry, saying Tauka isn't the type to abandon them. They head outside and soon spot Tauka, surrounded by a pile of monster corpses. Tauka calmly explains that he took out these monsters after sensing their presence nearby. Eve's eyes widen when she sees that one of the fallen creatures is a human-faced beast, and she can't believe that Tauka managed to defeat such a formidable opponent by himself. Tauka shrugs it off, saying it wasn't all that troublesome compared to what he's accustomed to, and he begins searching the monsters for any usable ingredients. Eve is still stunned by his abilities, but Sarah smiles and comments that this is just how Tauka is. She reflects on how it's because of him that they're able to move so confidently through the land of monsters, and she believes that Tauka can make the impossible possible, but silently hopes he won't carry too much of the burden alone. The scene then cuts to them standing before a range of towering mountains. They quickly realize the mountains are too tall for even Slay to climb, leaving them with no choice but to take the path around to cross the area. Tauka then spots a trail that leads along the cliffs on the eastern side and urges everyone to hurry up. Sarah suggests that Tauka take a rest before they continue, but he dismisses the idea, insisting he's fine. He feels the growing humidity in the air and senses that rain is on the way, so he determinedly pushes them to cover as much ground as possible before the storm hits. The group continues along the path Tauka found, feeling uneasy about the lack of monsters. They speculate that this could mean they're getting closer to the Witch of Taboos. Tauka then turns to Lisbeth, asking if she's alright, and wonders if the land of monsters scares her. Lisbeth admits that it is frightening, but reassures him that she's okay. Tauka half-jokingly hopes she won't say something like dying here is better than living in Monroy. But Lisbeth replies that while there may be some truth to that, she doesn't believe she will die here. She confidently states that Sarah told her they will reach their destination safely as long as Tauka is alive, so Tauka can't help but think she's placing a little too much trust in him. Lisbeth goes on to say that because of Sarah's faith in him, she also believes they'll be fine as long as they have Tauka. This leaves him feeling both flattered and uneasy, realizing both Lisbeth and Sarah have put their complete trust in him, so he is determined not to betray that faith, and he resolves to do his best. After some time, they finally reach a cave. Tauka notes that once they make it through, they should be close to the Witch of Taboos, so the group feels a sense of relief for having made it this far. Eve then expresses her gratitude to Tauka, but he brushes it off, saying there's no need to thank him. They wouldn't have gotten this far without the map Eve provided. He points out that he didn't help them out of goodwill, they simply had what the other wanted. Eve then opens up, admitting that she always wanted to escape her life in the bloodsport arena and live a peaceful life with Lisbeth. That dream was stolen from her, but thanks to Tauka, she now has a chance to make it a reality. She adds that once this is all over, she plans to open a farm with Lisbeth, and perhaps that future isn't as far away as she once thought. Suddenly, a monster appears behind Eve, and she swiftly slays it. But Tauka can't shake a feeling of unease, wondering if the creature is truly dead. Eve confirms that it seems to be, and Tauka uses a paralysis spell to be sure. The spell has no effect, confirming the monster is dead, but Tauka's instincts still tell him something is wrong. Then the dead creature unexpectedly lets out a haunting howl, echoing through the cave. Tauka's eyes widen, he suspects it's trying to summon other monsters. As the howl fades, Eve asks what it was, and Tauka's senses go on high alert as he feels a swarm of monsters closing in from all directions. Even his classmates that position deeper in the forest notice the movement of the creatures too, all heading toward the same place. Tauka realizes the situation is becoming dire. He isn't sure if he can handle such a massive onslaught. Tauka finally realizes that this forest is the natural hunting ground for the big mouth monster, and the death cry it let out was like a beacon, drawing other monsters toward them. He can hardly believe that a single cry could summon so many beasts, and he notes that they still have a little time before the creatures arrive. At that moment, Eve steps forward, offering to draw the beasts toward her, giving the others a chance to search for the Witch of Taboos. She promises to create an opening for their escape. Lisbeth immediately tries to stop her, but Eve refuses. She explains that her carelessness led them to this situation, and it's only right that she takes responsibility. Eve points out that her senses are sharp, and she's an expert at maneuvering through terrain like this. Before she leaves, she instructs Lisbeth to listen to Sarah and Tauka until she returns, and Lisbeth reluctantly agrees. Tauka, not one to let this slide so easily, tells Eve that he'll allow her to lure the monsters, but only if she promises to come back alive. Eve assures him she will, but Tauka isn't convinced. She thought he'd agree this quickly. He explains that her odds of surviving such a risky move are slim, and that she doesn't need to bear the weight of responsibility alone. He reminds her that the monsters she cut down were so well hidden, they only revealed themselves when they were practically on top of them, so there was nothing she could have done to prevent it. Sarah then chimes in, saying that if she were in Eve's position, she would have acted the same way. Tauka takes it further, admitting that it's actually his fault for not using his status ailment skill on the monster sooner. So he insists there's no reason for Eve to take all the blame. Eve tries to argue, but Tauka quickly cuts her off, telling her she's absolutely indispensable if they want to reach the Witch of Taboos. He reminds her that the witch entrusted her people with the map, meaning that bringing someone the witch already trusts could make negotiations much smoother. As he speaks, Tauka notices his voice projection gem is almost fully hardened, so he integrates it into his mask, hoping it will work. Tauka then points out that right now, the only team with the best chance of survival is himself, Pigemaru, and Slay. He explains that his status ailment skill is the only ability that can deal lethal blows to the human-faced monsters. And while responsibility is important, he firmly declares that it's his job to decide where that responsibility falls in their warband. He tells Eve not to worry, and after a moment, she nods, understanding. Sarah wishes Tauka luck, and he tells her that if he doesn't return, he'll leave the rest in her capable hands. Sarah, slightly unsettled, asks him not to say such ominous things, but for now she accepts his orders, and with that Tauka takes his leave. Elsewhere, we see the heroes fleeing from the rampaging monsters in the forest. Everyone is frantically trying to escape, while Xiaogo and Kiri fight off the advancing beasts. Kiri quickly realizes they're nothing more than obstacles to these creatures, mere nuisances. Then one of the girls stumbles and falls, and just as a monster is about to kill her, Kabato swoops in to save her. But the girl is so terrified that she bolts, leaving Kabato behind. Kabato tries to reassure herself, thinking it's going to be alright, no one has died yet. But then she bitterly remembers Tauka is already dead, so the realization sinks in just as a monster lunges at her. Meanwhile, Tauka senses the approaching monsters and explains that he's hidden Sarah and the others safely in a nearby cave. Then, with his mana, he brings forth Slay's ultimate form and heads to a clearing deep in the forest. He orders Pigimaro to signal the start of the battle, and Pigimaro uses the voice projection gem in Tauka's mask to broadcast his voice across the area, luring all the monsters toward him. Tauka smirks as the beasts take the bait, thinking to himself that this is going to be one hell of a chase. And with that, Slay takes off, running at full speed with the horde of monsters hot on their asses. Tauka then realizes that survival is far from guaranteed, especially with these human-faced beasts being so powerful. But he can't let the others see his doubts, so he turns to his familiars and asks them if they'll put their lives in his hands to protect everyone else. And without any hesitation they agree. So with that, Tauka combines with Pigimaro, while Slay keeps running at full speed, giving it everything he's got. Meanwhile, Ayaka learns the grim news: 2 of their classmates are dead from the recent monster outbreak. Angry and confused, she confronts Yasu, since they were part of his group. Yasu, in typical fashion, coldly replies that the lives of higher-ranking heroes like himself are more important than those scrubs. That's why he prioritized saving himself. He shrugs, saying it was their fault for being weak, and that's why they died. Ayaka, however, isn't buying it, and she remembers how Yasu did nothing when the monsters stampeded toward them, and calls him out. Yasu, clearly irritated, snaps at her, demanding to know what she's trying to say. So she calmly explains that as a class hero, it was his responsibility to protect the classmates in his group, because he was the only one strong enough to do so at the time. This stings Yasu, making him feel inferior, and in his frustration, he snaps. He tells Ayaka to shut up, accusing her of always acting like she's better than everyone else. Ayaka, still composed, clarifies that she's simply saying he should have protected them. But Yasu doubles down, stating it's not his problem they died because they were weak, and he survived because he was strong. Ayaka reminds him that with strength comes the duty to protect the weak, but Yasu scoffs at the idea. He angrily asks why she's talking like she's one of the strong, and sarcastically dismisses her noblesse oblige nonsense, accusing her of playing the saint while secretly looking down on everyone. He then reveals his real feelings, saying the classmates who died got what they deserved. They were the first to throw Tauka under the bus when he was sent to his doom, and they made fun of him behind his back. So in Yasu's eyes, their deaths were just karma, and there's no way he's going to feel sorry for them. Seeing him whining like that, Kiri scoffs, calling Yasu a pathetic little wimp, telling him to man up. He goes on about how everyone has a natural limit, and only when they hit it do they truly prove themselves. Until then, Kiri says, any success Yasu has will be nothing but a fluke. He then sneers, adding that Yasu is way beneath him, with zero chance of ever reaching his level of power. Kiri then points his sword at Yasu, and mocks him, calling him a nameless loser for forgetting his place and acting like a fool in front of Ayaka. He sneers that Yasu is just embarrassing himself trying to handle power that's far beyond him, and that real power is meant for those of noble caliber like himself. Hearing this, Yasu's fury ignites, and his power surges. Xiaogo steps forward, ready to throw down, but Kiri continues to dismiss Yasu as a nobody. Yasu shoots back, saying Kiri needs to get over himself, pointing out that being S-class doesn't automatically make him stronger. He gestures towards Ayaka, noting that she's an S-class hero who hasn't even unlocked her unique ability yet. Proving rank isn't everything. He adds that Asagi, who's only B-class, has already mastered a skill stronger than Xiaogo's, despite him being a class. Yasu smirks, telling Kiri that if he thinks rank alone makes him better, he's dead wrong. Sooner or later, Yasu swears, he'll show Kiri who truly possesses royal caliber. Xiaogo fumes at the insult, but Kiri holds him back as Yasu walks away. Turning to Ayaka, Kiri coldly tells her that she's a disgrace to the S-class title, and he hopes she gets that through her thick skull. Before leaving, Kiri adds that he'll just have to show everyone what real caliber looks like so even idiots can understand. As he departs, one of the girls remarks that Kabato is nowhere to be seen, and Ayaka starts to worry. Meanwhile, in the cave, Eve suddenly declares that she's going after Tauka. Sarah is surprised and demands an explanation, So Eve explains that there are simply too many monsters out there for Tauka to handle alone, even with his unique skill. She also points out that Tauka isn't in peak condition right now. Ever since they entered the land of monsters, he's had the least sleep out of all of them. Eve suspects that Tauka has been using his sleep skill on the group to help them rest peacefully, sacrificing his own rest in the process. So it's likely the only reason they've made it this far into the heart of the forest. Eve adds that she wasn't just talking big before they parted ways, she really is an expert at moving unnoticed in difficult terrain like this. Plus, with her night vision, she doesn't need to worry about a light giving away her position. Sarah, realizing Eve is speaking the truth, listens as Eve continues. She points out that she's the only one who can carry both Tauka and Slay if they're badly injured. They simply can't afford to lose Tauka now. Sarah, understanding Eve isn't acting out of rash emotion, apologizes for doubting her. She explains that as the one in charge while Tauka is gone, she had to test Eve's resolve. Eve, half smiling, remarks that Sarah seems awfully fond of Tauka. Sarah blushes, admitting it's only natural since she's dedicated herself to him. Before leaving, Eve asks Lisbeth to follow Sarah's lead, and Sarah makes her promise to return alive. Eve nods, assuring her she will. She then asks Sarah to take care of Lisbeth, and Sarah firmly replies that she'll do everything in her power to protect her. As Eve turns to go, she can't help but think that Tauka's influence is rubbing off on Sarah too, and then she leaves. Elsewhere, Tauka spreads Pigimaru out, targeting the monsters behind him, and unleashes Berserk on a cluster of them. This causes some of the monsters to turn on each other, but the rest don't seem to care and keep chasing him. Tauka can't believe how quickly these creatures shift gears and uses Paralyze on a few others, but it only stalls them for a brief moment before they resume their pursuit. He then notices that the human-faced beasts leading the charge are starting to adapt to his tentacle attacks, so he frustratedly asks his familiars if they can keep pushing through. They respond that they can, just as the sky opens up and it begins to pour. The rain muffles the sound of the approaching monsters, making it harder for Tauka to track them by ear. The heavy downpour also severely limits his visibility, and he realizes with a sinking feeling that his MP is depleting fast. He knows he can't afford to sever his combination with Pigimaru, not in the middle of this battle, but at this rate. They've only got about 10 minutes left before the fusion wears off. Thinking quickly, Tauka realizes that the only way to keep up the fight is to level up. He sets his sights on the human-faced beasts since they're worth massive experience. But he knows it's a huge gamble, and that if he's not near them when they die, he won't get any of the experience. That means he'll have to circle back the way he came, so he asks his familiars if they'll stick with him if he has a plan, and they assure him they're in it together. And he can't help but feel grateful for such loyal allies. With newfound determination, they charge straight at the monsters, making a beeline for the human-faced beasts. Tauka casts Dark and Paralyze on the creatures surrounding the beasts, affecting the targets as well. Then, without hesitation, he casts Berserk, wiping out the lot of them. Then the surge of experience hits him, and he levels up on the spot. His stats refresh, and with renewed energy, he realizes he can keep fighting a little longer. He spreads Pigimaru's tentacles once more, understanding that the only way to win this chaotic battle is to manage his experience points and keep leveling up. Tauka then uses Paralyze and Berserk on the monsters swarming around him, thinking he's still got plenty of MP left, and he just needs to take these monsters out one by one. As he runs, he spots two massive monsters gaining on him fast, so he tries to cast Sleep on them, but the monsters use others as meat shields, blocking his line of sight. Not missing a beat, Tauka tricks them by leaping off of Slay, slipping behind the larger beasts, and paralyzing them from the back. With a quick Berserk, he wipes them out, leveling up again. He then jumps back onto Slay, but the monsters aren't letting up, and they keep coming. So he keeps casting Paralyze, Berserk, Dark, and Sleep on as many as he can. But things take a turn when Slay trips over some monster corpses. In no time, they're surrounded, so Tauka desperately throws out his abilities in every direction as the monsters close in. He barely manages to hold them off, but somehow he keeps leveling up in the process. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, we see Kabato alive and kicking. Turns out she managed to kill that monster from earlier. But she's wrestling with doubt. Unlike Ayaka, she feels useless. All she could do was hide while they exiled Tauka to the ruins. She wants to protect everyone like Ayaka does, but she's terrified she'll end up dead if she tries. That's when Eve stumbles upon her, wondering why a human girl is wandering around in a place like this. Kabato reminds Eve of Lisbeth, so she tries to offer help, but Kabato freaks out, scared out of her mind. Before Eve can say much, Itsuki attacks, rushing in to defend Kabato. Eve tries to explain herself, but Itsuki's next move robs her of her voice. Itsuki coldly says she can't let Eve hurt Kobato, following orders from her sister. That's when Eve puts 2 and 2 together. These are the heroes from another world that Tauka had warned about. But before she can even process it, Itsuki goes in for another strike. We then see Lisbeth stressing over Tauka and her big sister, while Sarah tries to calm her down. Sarah reminds her that Tauka himself said he had the best chance of survival here and wouldn't lie without a good reason, so she confidently assures Lisbeth that he'll come back in one piece. Meanwhile, Itsuki goes after Eve, launching attacks that Eve dodges with ease. Blow after blow, Eve evades them all, but she notices that Itsuki's attacks are getting sharper and more precise with every strike. It clicks. Itsuki is the type that levels up through real combat. Just as Itsuki is about to land the final hit, her sister Hijiri steps in and stops her, causing Itsuki to pull back, confused and asking why she interfered. Hijiri explains that Eve isn't a monster, at least not like the ones they've fought so far. The two sisters then start debating whether Eve's more like a lioness or a leopard. They figure it doesn't really matter. But Hijiri points out that Eve's intelligence sets her apart. She notes the way Eve carries herself is more human-like, meaning they might actually be able to communicate with her. Itsuki isn't buying it, though, since Eve hasn't said a single word throughout the fight. But Hijiri clarifies that Itsuki's attack disabled her voice, so Itsuki realizes she screwed up, and Hijiri apologizes on her sister's behalf, explaining that Itsuki's a bit too quick to follow orders, which led to her rushing into action. Itsuki also apologizes, and while Eve thinks Hijiri seems reasonable, she's definitely not letting her guard down. Hijiri then politely states she'd like to ask Eve a few questions, asking her to answer with gestures since she still can't speak. She first asks if Eve holds any hostility toward them, and Eve shakes her head, signaling that she doesn't. Hijiri then asks if she has any issue with them parting ways, and again Eve shows no concern. As this unfolds, Eve can't help but notice that Hijiri's deductive skills remind her of Tauka. Right when she's wondering who Hijiri is, Hijiri introduces herself, explaining that they are humans from another world. As Eve slowly regains her voice, she asks why Hijiri bothered with the introduction. Hijiri simply says it's a matter of courtesy, and then reveals she's familiar with Eve. She's recently heard rumors of a leopard bloodsport warrior who went missing, and she wonders if Eve is searching for someone. Eve states that she's looking for her master, and from her determination, Hijiri realizes that Eve truly believes he survived the monster stampede. This clues Hijiri and Eve's master must be incredibly strong, especially if he could survive encounters with human-faced beasts. When Hijiri expresses this thought, Eve replies that her master can't be judged by such simple measures, sparking even more curiosity in Hijiri about him. And with that, Eve takes her leave. Next, we see Tauka dealing with the last wave of monsters surrounding him when, out of nowhere, a giant elephant beast attacks. Pigimaro runs out of energy just before Tauka can strike, so Tauka has no choice but to paralyze the monster with his own hands and then poison it. Even though Tauka still has MP left, Pigimaro is totally drained. He praises Pigimaro for holding out so long and disables their fused form. Turning to Slay, Tauka tells him he must be exhausted too, and asks him to let him know if he reaches his limit. Removing his mask, we see blood trickling from Tauka's mouth. He figures he must have gotten hurt during an earlier fall. Checking his status, he realizes he's already over level 2000. But while his stats recover with each level up, his physical wounds don't. Feeling weak, he senses one more monster lurking. It's a human-faced beast that's been watching him all this time. Tauka knows he can't land any of his skills without a direct line of sight, and he's certain the monster has figured that out too. Mounting Slay, Tauka gears up for what he thinks will be the final stage of the fight. Then the human-faced beast charges at them, using the bodies of dead monsters as cover. Tauka and Slay try to flee, but with the monster staying hidden, Tauka can't find an opening to attack. Suddenly, the creature fires beams at them. One beam manages to injure Tauka, and another strikes Slay, knocking Tauka off his mount. The fallen Tauka, exhausted but determined, asks Pigimaro for one last favor, and without hesitation Pigimaro agrees. Then, in a final desperate attempt, the monster blasts Tauka with beams, creating a thick cloud of smoke. Tauka uses his mask as a diversion, throwing it to distract the creature. The beast, realizing something's off, attacks a shadowy figure on the opposite side. But in a brilliant move, Tauka leaps from above, paralyzing the monster, and then he uses his berserk skill. Then, like twisting the knife deeper, he smirks and explains his entire plan. He'd thrown the mask to make the monster think he was flanking, while it attacked Pigimaro disguised as him. He then soared into the air with Slay's help, landing a perfect strike once he had a clear shot. He adds that the corpses surrounding the monster blocked his view, but they also kept the creature from spotting him, sealing the monster's fate. Tauka is now drained and collapses to his knees, realizing his HP has hit critical. He levels up again and discovers he's unlocked an advanced skill. Slay then reverts to a smaller form, and Tauka, apologizing for overworking both his familiars, suggests they head back to Sarah and the others. But then he notices his legs are in terrible shape. To top it off, a monster lurking nearby jumps out, ready to strike. But before Tauka can react, Eve slays it in one swift move. Tauka then thought to himself that he had a feeling this would happen. Eve picks everyone up and carries them, mentioning that she ran into some heroes from another world while searching for him, 3 girls named Hijiri, Itsuki, and Kabato. Tauka immediately wonders if she mentioned his name, but Eve reassures him she didn't, as she wasn't sure of his connection to them. Tauka is relieved and believes it's better they continue thinking he's dead. After all, heroes are just another obstacle in his quest for revenge on the goddess. Eve is stunned that even in this weakened state, Tauka's mind is still sharp. Then finally they reunite with the others, who are overjoyed to see them alive. Tauka then asks Sarah to check on Slay for him, and later that night, we see her tending to his wounds after looking in on Slay. While Eve steps outside to keep watch, Sarah finishes patching up Tauka. He can't help but think she's incredible. Not only can she heal wounds, but she can wield a sword too. Sarah casually adds that she can sew as well, and then she sews up Tauka's overcoat. Noticing he's still awake, she asks why he can't sleep. Tauka admits he's still too tense, so she offers him her lap to rest on, saying she's also too on edge to sleep. Tauka, knowing full well she's faking it, accepts the offer anyway, muttering that it's been a while since he slept in someone's lap. Sarah, in a soft tone, tells him not to shoulder everything on his own. He wonders if he looks that worn out, and she says that while he was brave enough to put on a fearless face when all the monsters attacked at once, calming Eve and Lisbeth, she could still sense the lies underneath. She confesses that she worries he might one day take on a burden too heavy and end up breaking under it. So Tauka, with a half smile, asks her to just keep supporting him if she's that concerned. Sarah agrees, and he reflects that he's glad he's returned to his old self since coming to this world after all. If he'd stayed the soft-hearted guy he used to be, he'd be dead by now. Feeling a bit lighter, he figures things will be fine for now, and Sarah tells him to let her know if there's anything else she can do. He teases her, saying she's overprotective, just like a big sister. Sarah immediately bristles at being sister-zoned, but then curiously asks how old he is. Tauka reveals that he's 17, and Sarah is shocked to learn he's younger than her. Tauka always assumed Sarah was much older, given that she's a long-lived high elf, but she surprises him by saying she's only 2 years older. Sarah reflects on how much she still doesn't know about him, and Tauka jokingly wonders if she's going to start treating him like a younger brother now. But she firmly tells him no as the leader of their party. His age doesn't matter to her. Tauka eventually drifts off to sleep, and Sarah watches him, realizing how exhausted he must have been. As she looks at his peaceful face, she reflects on how deeply she's fallen for him, something she never expected. After making sure he's comfortable, she tries to get up, but accidentally trips and falls on top of him. The sudden closeness overwhelms her, and for a moment, she feels the temptation to kiss him. She leans in, but stops herself at the last second. The scene cuts to her lying beside Tauka as he wakes up. Tauka notices she's struggling to sleep and asks for her permission to use his skill to help her relax. After she agrees, he uses it to gently put her to sleep. However, we soon learn that Tauka never actually fell asleep. He saw everything Sarah tried to do and now fully understands her feelings for him. The realization hits him hard, and he's surprised that he let himself be so vulnerable around her without noticing sooner. Later, we see Kabato and the Takao sisters traveling together, on their way to reunite with the others. Itsuki asks Kabato why she's in Asaga's group, mentioning that Kabato seems more like a leader herself. Kabato recalls the time she had to kill a monster for the first time, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Asagi had stepped in to help her pass the test, telling her that they needed to support each other in moments of weakness. Kabato explains that this is why she remains loyal to Asagi's group. Itsuki warns her that Asagi gives off a dangerous vibe, and Kabato agrees but believes that this dangerous edge might be exactly what they need to save Ayaka. As the story returns to Tauka and his group, they continue their journey through the forest. Along the way, Sarah confides in Tauka, telling him that there's something she wants to confess, but only when she's ready. She feels it's unfair to keep it one-sided, yet she fears losing his trust if she reveals her feelings now. She decides she'll tell him one day, unaware that Tauka already knows everything. Tauka, for his part, is relieved she hasn't figured that out yet and resolves to keep things as they are for the time being. As they move deeper into the forest, they come across magical seals on some of the trees. Tauka analyzes the seals, realizing they only activate under certain conditions. Sarah points out that the seals are damaged and old, so they won't trigger. Hearing this, Tauka hopes the witch who made the seals is still alive. And soon enough, they stumble upon a golem that awakens at their arrival. Tauka quickly paralyzes it, and Eve suggests destroying the creature. But Tauka stops her, warning that the witch who created it may not appreciate that. They then head deeper in, and the complete lack of monsters around them makes it obvious they've reached the witch's lair. Spotting a small house nearby, they investigate and discover an underground entrance. Inside, they find golems mining away at something. Since the golems aren't bothering them, Tauka decides to leave them be. Moving further into the cave, they encounter a sealed door. Tauka pours his magic into it, and judging by how much power the door demands, he quickly realizes that the witch didn't hide it for just anyone to stumble upon. Then, with enough effort, they manage to open the door. Meanwhile, we see Kabato and the Takao sisters reuniting with their classmates. Asagi rushes to hug Kabato, relieved that she's safe. After learning that the Takao sisters helped her, Asagi admits that, despite their appearances, they're actually pretty nice. Ayaka is also equally glad to see Kabato unharmed. Then Asagi takes it upon herself to inform the four saints to stop their search, as Kabato has been found. Kabato, though, reflects on her weakness, knowing she must become stronger. Hijiri then comments that searching for Kabato was the right decision. She explains that the spies they found in the forest were likely there to assassinate the students, not just one or two, but many of them, and she emphasizes that Kabato's death could have shattered Ayaka's heart, because if Ayaka were to break now, something catastrophic would happen, and that would be nothing but boring. Back with Tauka and the others, they find themselves on the other side of the gate, surprised by the sight of an underground sky. They speculate that it could be magic at work, and Tauka wonders if they've been transported to another realm. They then spot the Witch of Taboos, and Tauka senses that she may be their key to exacting revenge on the goddess. Cut to the goddess, who has just received word that the Great Demon Empire's forces are on the move, so she orders one of her subordinates to tell the four saints to recall the heroes immediately. She muses about how strong, and perhaps how wounded her heroes have become, excitement bubbling up as she anticipates finding out. Back in the strange underground realm, the hot Witch of Taboos greets Tauka and his crew, introducing herself as Erika Anuravel. As Tauka listens, he thinks to himself that he's going to annihilate everything the goddess holds dear, and he will get his revenge no matter what. This was the end of Season 1. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more anime recaps.